My son looked me dead in the eye and said, "Dad, I decided to sell your house to buy a new car for my wife, so you have 48 hours to pack your things and get out." He tossed a glossy brochure for a cheap nursing home onto the table like he was doing me a favor. My daughter-in-law just sat there scrolling through her phone, smirking as if my entire life was nothing more than a transaction she had already closed. I just smiled at them. I nodded slowly and continued eating my dinner. They thought I was a senile old man who had finally given up. They had no idea that the house they were planning to sell had already been sold 3 days ago, and the check was sitting in a trust fund they could never touch. My name is Ellis Freeman, and I am 68 years old. I have lived in the Bedford-Stuyvesant neighborhood of Brooklyn for 40 years. To the new neighbors who walk their expensive French bulldogs past my stoop, I am just the old black man who wears faded coveralls and tends to his rose bushes. They see the grease under my fingernails and assume I am poor. They see my 1998 sedan parked on the street and assume I have no money. They have no idea that I hold 3 patents for industrial electrical systems, or that this brownstone I bought for $45,000 back in 1980 is now worth $2.5 million. I learned a long time ago that silence is power and wealth does not need to scream to be heard. But tonight my silence was about to become a weapon. Before I tell you how I taught my ungrateful son the hardest lesson of his life, please tell me in the comments where you are watching from. If you have ever had to stand your ground against family members who mistook your kindness for weakness, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It all started on a humid Tuesday evening. I had spent 6 hours in the kitchen preparing gumbo. It was not just any soup, it was my late wife Esther's recipe. The secret was in the roux. You have to stir the flour and oil constantly over low heat until it turns the color of dark chocolate. If you stop for even a second, it burns. It takes patience. It takes love. Esther passed away 5 years ago, and making her gumbo was the only way I could still feel her presence in this big, empty house. The air was thick with the smell of thyme bay leaves and simmering seafood. I had set the dining table with the good china, the plates with the gold rim that we only used for Christmas. I wanted everything to be perfect, because my son Tyrell and his wife Courtney were coming for dinner. They arrived 45 minutes late. Tyrell did not apologize. He just walked in checking his watch, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. He is 32 years old, but he still walks with the swagger of a teenager who thinks the world owes him something. He was wearing a designer suit that I knew he bought on credit, because Tyrell has not held a steady job in 8 months, though he thinks I do not know that. Trailing behind him was Courtney. She is 28 years old with blonde hair that costs more to maintain than my monthly utility bill. She walked into my home wrinkling her nose as if she had just stepped into a garbage dump. "It smells like old grease in here," she said, loud enough for me to hear. She did not say hello. She did not hug me. She just walked past me, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood floors that I had sanded and stained with my own hands 30 years ago. She looked around the living room with a critical eye, scanning the walls as if she were mentally stripping the wallpaper. Tyrell kissed me on the cheek, but it felt cold. "Hey, Dad," he mumbled, avoiding my eyes. I smiled and pointed to the table. "I made gumbo," I said. "Esther's recipe. It is ready whenever you are." Courtney made a face of pure disgust. She waved her hand in front of her nose. "Oh, Ellis, that is sweet, but I cannot eat that. It is too heavy. All that oil and starch. It is terrible for the skin. Besides, Tyrell and I are on a strict diet." I felt a tightening in my chest. This gumbo was not just food. It was a memory. I had spent the entire day on my feet chopping vegetables and stirring the pot just to welcome them. "Do not worry about it, Dad," Tyrell said quickly, pulling out his phone. "We will just order something." Before I could say another word, Courtney was already looking at a delivery app. "Let's get sushi from that new place downtown, the one with the 5-star rating," she said. 20 minutes later, a delivery driver rang the doorbell. Tyrell paid for the order using a credit card that I was 90% sure was maxed out. He brought in 3 plastic bags filled with high-end sushi. I saw the receipt peeking out of the bag, $412. They had spent over $400 on raw fish for a Tuesday dinner, while my pot of gumbo sat cooling on the stove untouched. They sat at my table opening their plastic containers, ignoring the china plates I had set out. Courtney poured soy sauce into a little plastic dish and didn't even offer me a piece. I sat at the head of the table with a small bowl of my wife's soup, eating in silence. So Dad Tyrell started speaking with his mouth full of tuna. "We need to talk." The tone of his voice made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It was the same tone he used when he crashed his car in high school and needed me to fix it. It was the tone of a man who was about to ask for something he did not deserve. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of car keys. He dropped them onto the mahogany table with a heavy clatter. I recognized the keychain. It was the Porsche Cayenne he had bought 3 years ago, a car he could not afford to impress people he did not like. "I am selling the Porsche," he announced. I nodded slowly. "That sounds like a sensible decision, son. You do not need a car that expensive." Courtney let out a sharp laugh. It sounded like glass breaking. "Oh no, Ellis, you misunderstand. We are not downsizing. We are upgrading." Tyrell cleared his throat. "Yeah, Dad. The Porsche is getting old. It has 50,000 miles on it. Courtney needs something better for her brand. She is building a following on Instagram, and image is everything. We are getting a G-Wagon. A G-Wagon." I did the math in my head instantly. That was a vehicle that cost at least $180,000. My son, who was drowning in debt from failed crypto investments, wanted to buy a tank that cost more than most people earn in 3 years. "That is a lot of money, Tyrell," I said calmly, taking a spoonful of gumbo. "How do you plan to pay for it?" Tyrell exchanged a look with Courtney. It was a look of conspiracy, a look that said, "Here it comes." "That is actually what we need to discuss," Tyrell said. He pushed his sushi tray aside and leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Dad, look around you. This house. It is too much for you. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a basement, a backyard. It is ridiculous for one old man to live here alone. It is dusty. It is old-fashioned. The stairs are dangerous." I put my spoon down. My hand was steady, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. "What are you saying, son?" "I am saying it is time to sell," Tyrell said. His voice was firm, but his eyes were darting around the room, unable to lock on to mine. "The market in Brooklyn is peaking right now. This neighborhood is hot. If we sell now, we can get top dollar." "We?" I asked. "Since when is this house we?" "I bought this house in 1980, Tyrell. I paid the mortgage, I fixed the roof, I rewired the electricity. Your name is not on the deed." "Not yet," Courtney interjected, her voice dripping with venom. "But Tyrell is your only son, Ellis. It is all going to be his eventually anyway. Why wait until you are dead? We need the money now." I looked at her. She was checking her reflection in her spoon, adjusting a stray strand of hair. She spoke about my death as if it were a minor inconvenience she was waiting to resolve. "And where exactly do you propose I live?" I asked, my voice low. Tyrell reached into his jacket pocket again. This time he pulled out a brochure. It was glossy and colorful, with pictures of smiling old people playing checkers. "Shady Pines," Tyrell said, sliding the brochure across the table. "I already spoke to the director. They have a bed opening up next week. It is a great facility, Dad. 3 meals a day, medical staff on site, no stairs to climb. It is $3,000 a month, which is very affordable compared to maintaining this brownstone." Shady Pines, I knew that place. Ew. It was a state-funded facility on the outskirts of the city, known for being understaffed and smelling of bleach and despair. It was a warehouse for the elderly, a place where families dumped their relatives when they did not want to deal with them anymore. "So let me get this straight," I said slowly, making sure I understood the depth of their betrayal. "You want to sell my home, the home where you grew up, the home where your mother died, so you can buy a luxury car for your wife. And you want to put me in a low-budget nursing home." Tyrell sighed loudly as if I were being unreasonable. "It is not just for the car, Dad. It is for your own good. You are getting old. You forget things. Last week you forgot to call me on my birthday." I had not forgotten. I had called him 3 times, but he had sent me to voicemail because he was at a casino. I knew this because I tracked the family phone plan, which I still pay for. "It is done," Ellis, Courtney snapped, losing her patience. She slammed her hand on the table, making the silverware jump. "We have already contacted a realtor. He is coming in 48 hours to take photos. You need to start packing tonight. We can't have all this junk lying around. It looks like a museum in here." She gestured to the corner where my vinyl record collection sat. Hundreds of rare jazz albums I had collected over 50 years. To her it was junk. To me it was my soul. Tyrell looked at me, his face hardening. "Look, Dad, I am doing this whether you like it or not. I am your next of kin. I know what is best. You have 48 hours. Pack your clothes, leave the furniture, we will sell it with the house." I looked at my son. I looked for the little boy who used to sit on my lap while I read him stories. I looked for the young man I had taught to ride a bike on this very sidewalk. He was gone. In his place sat a stranger, a weak man consumed by greed and controlled by a woman who despised him almost as much as she despised me. I could have yelled. I could have thrown them out. I could have told them right then and there that I had more money in my checking account than they would see in 10 lifetimes. I could have told them that I knew about Tyrell's $350,000 in gambling debts and the lawsuit pending against him for credit card fraud, but I didn't. Because anger is a fire that burns out quickly, but revenge is a slow, cold river that cuts through stone. I looked at the brochure for Shady Pines. I looked at the keys to the Porsche. And then I looked at Courtney, who was already typing on her phone, probably looking up accessories for her imaginary G-Wagon. I picked up my spoon and took another bite of my wife's gumbo. It was cold now, but it still tasted like home. "Okay," I said softly. Tyrell blinked. "What?" I said, "Okay." "You are right, son. I am getting old. Maybe it is time." Courtney stopped typing. Her eyes lit up with predatory glee. "See, Tyrell, I told you he would be reasonable. Just give me the 48 hours, I said. I have a lot of memories to pack." Tyrell let out a breath he had been holding. He actually smiled a genuine smile of relief. "Thanks, Dad. You won't regret this. It is going to be great. You will see. Shady Pines is going to be like a vacation for you." They finished their $400 sushi, talking excitedly about the color of the new car. "Matte black with red leather interior," Courtney insisted. They talked about how they would knock down the wall between the kitchen and the living room to make it more open concept for the buyers. They talked about my home as if I were already dead and buried. When they left, Tyrell patted me on the shoulder. "Be ready by Friday morning, Dad. The movers will be here at 8. I locked the heavy oak door behind them. I engaged the deadbolt, the chain, and the security bar. I stood in the hallway listening to the silence of my house. My grandfather clock ticked in the corner, a steady rhythmic heartbeat. They thought the lion was old. They thought his teeth had fallen out. They thought they could walk into his den and take his territory without a fight. They were wrong. I walked to the kitchen and scraped the rest of the gumbo into a container to freeze. I would not waste it. Then I went to the basement to my workbench. I moved a heavy box of tools aside and pried up a loose floorboard. Underneath was a small fireproof safe. I dialed the combination. Click, click, click. The door swung open. Inside was a stack of documents bound in leather. The deed to the house, the patent certificates, and the bank statements from my offshore trust in Switzerland. I pulled out my old flip phone, the one Tyrell always made fun of because it wasn't a smartphone. I dialed a number I had not called in years. It rang twice. "Hello," a gravelly voice answered. "O'Malley," I said. "It is Ellis." "Ellis, it is late. Is everything all right?" "Execute Plan B," I said, my voice steady and cold. They took the bait. There was a pause on the other end, then a low chuckle. "Are you sure, Ellis? Once we start this, there is no going back. They will be left with nothing." I looked up at the ceiling toward the master bedroom where my son and his wife planned to sleep after they kicked me out. I thought about the brochure for Shady Pines. I thought about the G-Wagon. "I am sure," I said. "Burn it all down, O'Malley. Let's show them what happens when you bite the hand that fed you." I hung up the phone and sat in the dark. The war had begun and my son had no idea he had just fired the first shot at his own funeral. I did not even get the 48 hours they had promised me. The sun had barely risen over the Brooklyn skyline, painting the streets in a pale gray light when a violent pounding on the front door shattered the silence of my morning coffee. It was 7 in the morning. I was sitting in the kitchen staring at the empty spot on the wall where a picture of Esther used to hang, wondering how I was going to pack 40 years of life into a few cardboard boxes. But my son and his wife apparently decided that even 2 days was too much time for an old man to say goodbye to his dignity. I opened the heavy oak door and found my stoop completely blocked by a mountain of luggage. There were at least 10 suitcases, all brand new hard-shell designer bags with the Louis Vuitton logo stamped all over them. They looked like they cost more than my first car. Standing behind this wall of expensive leather was Tyrell, looking exhausted and annoyed, and Courtney, who was wearing oversized sunglasses and holding a large iced coffee despite the morning chill. "Surprise," Courtney chirped, pushing past me into the hallway without waiting for an invitation. We decided, why wait? The movers can take your stuff later, but we need to start staging the house for the realtor immediately. The lighting in the morning is perfect for my social media stories. Tyrell dragged the heavy suitcases across the threshold, scratching the hardwood floor I had refinished with my own hands 3 decades ago. He did not look at me. He just grunted with the effort, muttering something about how heavy Courtney's shoe collection was. "Dad, we are going to need the master bedroom," Tyrell said, dropping a bag with a heavy thud. "It has the best natural light and the ensuite bathroom. Courtney needs the space for her makeup station and her ring lights." The master bedroom. That room was a sanctuary. It was where Esther and I had spent 35 years sleeping side by side. It was where we had whispered our dreams in the dark, when we were young and broke. It was where I had held her hand as she took her last breath 5 years ago. Her perfume still lingered faintly on the curtains. Her favorite reading chair was still in the corner, exactly where she left it. I had not moved a single thing in that room since the day she died. "You cannot take that room," I said, my voice low and steady. "That was your mother's room." Courtney was already halfway up the stairs. She stopped and turned around, lifting her sunglasses to look at me with eyes cold as ice. Was Ellis. Keyword was, "Now it is just a dusty room full of old clothes that smell like mothballs. We are doing you a favor by clearing out that depressing energy. Besides, you are moving to Shady Pines, remember? You do not need a master suite in a nursing home." She turned and continued climbing her heels, digging into the carpet runner. I started to follow her, a rising panic in my chest, but Tyrell stepped in front of me, blocking my path. "Let her go, Dad," he said, his voice flat. "Do not make this difficult. She is stressed enough about the house sale. Just let her have the room." From upstairs, I heard the sound of a door being thrown open. Then I heard the distinct screech of wire hangers sliding violently across a metal rod. My heart stopped. Those were Esther's dresses, her Sunday best. The silk blouse she wore to our 25th anniversary, the floral dress she wore to Tyrell's graduation. I pushed past Tyrell and ran up the stairs, my bad knee protesting with every step. When I reached the landing, I froze. Courtney was in the master bedroom, standing in front of the open cedar closet. She was grabbing armfuls of my wife's clothes and throwing them out into the hallway like they were garbage. Bright fabrics flew through the air, landing in a heap on the floor. A blue silk scarf drifted down and landed on her muddy boot. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice trembling with a rage I had not felt in years. "Clearing space," Courtney said without stopping. "This closet is tiny. I need room for my winter collection. And honestly, Ellis, this stuff is ancient. Nobody wears polyester blends anymore. I am doing you a favor. You can donate it to the Salvation Army or use it for rags." She grabbed a heavy wool coat, the one Esther had saved for 3 winters to buy, and tossed it carelessly onto the pile. It slid across the floor and hit the wall. Tyrell came up behind me. He looked at the pile of his dead mother's clothes on the floor, and for a second, just a fleeting second, I saw a flicker of shame in his eyes. But then he looked at his wife, and the shame vanished, replaced by that pathetic desire to please her at any cost. "Courtney is right, Dad," Tyrell said, avoiding my gaze. "Mom has been gone for 5 years. It is unhealthy to keep all this stuff. We need to modernize the space if we want to get the asking price. Buyers do not want to see a dead woman's wardrobe." I walked over to the pile of clothes. I knelt down and picked up the blue scarf. It still smelled like lavender and vanilla. I folded it carefully. I did not scream. I did not strike them. I just started picking up the clothes one by one, folding them with gentle hands, ignoring the woman who was stripping my life bare. They watched me for a moment, expecting a fight. When I gave them only silence, they got bored. Courtney slammed the closet door shut and started talking about paint colors. She wanted to paint over the custom floral wallpaper Esther had picked out. She called it tacky. I carried the armful of clothes downstairs, my heart heavy as lead. I placed them gently on the living room sofa. I would have to find boxes. I would have to save what I could before they destroyed everything. Tyrell followed me down. He stood at the bottom of the stairs, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "Dad," he said, clearing his throat, "about your sleeping arrangements." I looked at him. He was pointing toward the door under the stairs, the door that led to the basement. "We need the guest rooms for storage," Tyrell explained. "Courtney has a lot of inventory for her online store, and we need a place to put the boxes. Plus, we might have potential buyers viewing the upper floors, so we need them to look uninhabited and spacious." He paused, waiting for me to understand. I understood perfectly. "So you want me to sleep in the basement?" I asked. "Just for a few days," Tyrell said quickly, "until the spot at Shady Pines opens up. It is private down there. You will have your own space. It is better this way. You won't be in the way when the stagers come. The basement. It was an unfinished concrete box. It was damp. It smelled of mildew and old pipes. There was one small window high up near the ceiling that let in a sliver of gray light. The floor was cold cement. There was no heating down there. In the winter, it was a freezer. In the summer, it was a sauna. You want your father to sleep on a concrete floor next to the furnace while you and your wife sleep in my bed? I asked quietly. There is a cot down there, Tyrell said, his voice hardening. And some old rugs. It is not that bad, Dad. Stop being dramatic. It is temporary. Just be grateful we are letting you stay here at all instead of dropping you off at a shelter. Grateful. He wanted me to be grateful. I looked at the door to the basement. Then I looked at the pile of Esther's clothes on the sofa. If I fought them now, they would throw me out on the street before I could execute my plan. I needed to be inside the house. I needed access to their documents, their conversations, their cruelty. I needed to let them think they had won so they would lower their guards. Fine, I said. The basement is fine. I gathered Esther's clothes in my arms. I picked up the small box of her jewelry that I had managed to hide before Courtney saw it, and I walked to the basement door. I descended into the darkness. The air grew colder with every step. I pulled the string for the single light bulb that hung from the ceiling. It flickered to life, casting long, harsh shadows against the concrete walls. In the corner was the old army cot I used for naps when I was working on projects. It was stained and dusty. Beside it was the furnace humming like a dying beast. This was my new reality. The master of the house banished to the dungeon, the provider treated like a parasite. I sat on the cot. It creaked under my weight. I placed Esther's clothes next to me, arranging them carefully so they wouldn't touch the dirty floor. Above me, I could hear their footsteps. I heard the heavy thud of furniture being dragged across the floor. I heard Courtney's high-pitched laughter. They were celebrating. They were erasing me. I closed my eyes and let the darkness wash over me. But in the dark, my mind traveled back. It was 1980. I was 24 years old. I had just married Esther. We had no money, but we had ambition. I found this house. It was a shell back then. The roof was caving in. The windows were broken. The city had condemned it. Everyone told me I was crazy. They said the neighborhood was bad. They said the house was a money pit. But I saw the bones. I saw the potential. The price was $45,000. It seemed like a fortune back then. I worked 3 jobs to scrape together the down payment. I worked as a janitor in the morning, a delivery driver in the afternoon, and an apprentice electrician at night. I slept 4 hours a day for 3 years. I remembered the day we got the keys. Esther cried on the front stoop. She touched the brick facade and said, "Ellis, this is our castle." I spent the next 10 years restoring it brick by brick. I learned plumbing. I learned carpentry. I became a master electrician because I couldn't afford to hire one. I poured my sweat and my blood into these walls. And now 40 years later, the neighborhood had changed. The hipsters had moved in. The coffee shops had opened. And my $45,000 shell was now a $2.5 million asset. Tyrell did not know that. He saw an old house. He did not know about the gentrification boom that had tripled the value in the last 5 years. He did not know that developers had been cold calling me, offering all cash deals which I had politely declined. He thought he was selling a burden. He had no idea he was trying to sell a gold mine that he did not own. I reached into the pocket of my coveralls and pulled out my old flip phone. The signal was weak in the basement, but it was there. I opened a new text message. I typed in the number for O'Malley, my lawyer and oldest friend. He was the only one who knew the full extent of my assets. He was the one who helped me set up the Esther Freeman Trust 5 years ago, right after she died, to protect everything from exactly this kind of situation. My thumbs moved slowly over the keypad. "They are here," I typed. They threw Esther's clothes in the hall. I am in the basement. I paused, listening to the footsteps upstairs. Courtney was shouting something about knocking down a wall. "Start plan B," I typed. "Do not show mercy." I hit send. I watched the little icon spin until it said, "Message sent." I put the phone back in my pocket and laid back on the cot, staring at the exposed wooden beams of the floor above me. Those beams were solid oak. I had reinforced them myself in 1992. They would hold the weight of the house, but they would not hold the weight of what was coming for my son. Upstairs, they were opening a bottle of wine. I heard the cork pop. I heard glasses clinking. They were toasting to their new life, to the G-Wagon, to the money they thought was days away. Let them drink. Let them celebrate. Let them think they are kings and queens of my castle. Because the eviction notice was already being drafted, and the landlord of this property was not the helpless old man shivering in the basement. The landlord was a trust fund that had zero tolerance for trespassers. I pulled Esther's wool coat over me as a blanket. It was cold, but I felt a fire burning in my gut. I closed my eyes and waited. The invasion had begun, but the counterattack was going to be legendary. They wanted to treat me like a rat in the cellar. Fine. They were about to find out that this rat owned the trap. The sound of industrial tape ripping echoed through my house like a gunshot. It was followed by the heavy thud of work boots and the screech of furniture being dragged across the floor. I was sitting on my cot in the basement staring at the ceiling beams trying to block out the noise, but then I heard something that made my blood freeze. It was the sound of glass shattering followed by Courtney's shrill voice shouting instructions. I threw the wool coat aside and climbed the stairs, my knees protesting with every step. When I opened the door to the hallway, I saw that my home had been invaded by a team of 4 men wearing blue coveralls. They were moving through my living room like a swarm of locusts. They were not cleaning, they were purging. Courtney stood in the center of the room, holding her phone in one hand and pointing with the other. She was wearing a white tracksuit that looked pristine against the chaos she was orchestrating. "Get rid of all of it," she commanded, pointing at the built-in mahogany shelves. "If it looks old or smells like dust, it goes in the dumpster. I want this place empty by noon." I watched in horror as one of the men grabbed a stack of my vinyl records. My heart stopped. That was not just music. That was my life's work. I had spent 40 years collecting those albums. There were first pressings of Miles Davis, John Coltrane, and Thelonious Monk. I had a signed copy of Kind of Blue that I had bought in a small shop in Harlem in 1982. That single record was worth $5,000. The entire collection was appraised at over $50,000 just last year. The man in the coveralls did not see $50,000. He saw heavy cardboard. He dumped the stack into a large black trash bag as if it were kitchen garbage. The sound of the vinyl discs clashing against each other was the sound of my history being erased. "Stop," I shouted. My voice was hoarse from the damp air of the basement, but it was loud enough to make them pause. "Do not touch those records." I rushed forward, ignoring the pain in my hip. I grabbed the arm of the man holding the trash bag. "Put it down," I said. "These are not trash. These are valuable." Courtney rolled her eyes and sighed loudly. "Oh my God, Ellis, are you serious right now? Nobody listens to that noise anymore. It is just taking up space. We need these shelves for the staging decor. Minimalist aesthetics, remember? Nobody wants to buy a house that looks like a storage unit for dead people." She signaled the man to continue. He shrugged and reached for another stack. This stack contained my original pressing of A Love Supreme. I felt a surge of adrenaline that I had not felt since my days working high voltage lines. I pushed past the man and grabbed the box of records, hugging it to my chest. "You are not taking this," I said, backing away. "This is mine. I bought this with my own money. You have no right." Tyrell walked into the room then. He was on his phone pacing back and forth, but he stopped when he saw me clutching the box of records like a lifeline. He hung up the call and stared at me with a look of pure exhaustion. "Dad, put the box down," he said, his voice tight. "No," I said. "Tell them to stop Tyrell. This collection is worth more than your car. It is worth more than that suit you are wearing. You cannot just throw it away." Tyrell rubbed his temples. "Dad, we do not have time for this. The realtor is coming tomorrow. We need the house cleared. We cannot sell a house full of junk." "It is not junk," I yelled, my voice cracking. "It is jazz. It is art. It is your heritage, son. Do you not remember listening to these with me on Sunday mornings? Do you not remember me teaching you about Coltrane?" Tyrell stepped closer. His face darkened. "I remember being bored, Dad. I remember wanting to watch cartoons and having to listen to trumpets instead. Nobody cares about your old records. We are trying to secure a future here, and you are crying about some dusty plastic discs." He reached for the box. I pulled back. I was 68 years old, but my grip was strong. My hands were calloused from decades of manual labor. Tyrell was young, but his hands were soft. He pulled, but I did not let go. "Give it to me," he snarled. "I will not," I said. Then it happened. The moment that broke whatever fragile bond was left between father and son. Tyrell did not just pull the box, he shoved me. It was a hard, violent push to my chest. I stumbled backward. My heel caught on the edge of the rug. I lost my balance. I fell hard, my back hitting the floorboards with a bone-jarring thud. The box flew from my hands. The records spilled out across the floor, sliding out of their sleeves. I heard the sickening crack of vinyl snapping. My signed copy of Kind of Blue lay broken in 2 pieces right next to my head. Pain shot through my hip and up my spine. I lay there for a moment, stunned, unable to breathe. I looked up at my son. He was standing over me, breathing heavily, his hands balled into fists. For a second, he looked horrified at what he had done. He took a half-step toward me, his mouth opening as if to apologize. But Courtney was faster. She did not gasp. She did not rush to help me. She pulled out her phone. I saw the ring light flash in her eyes as she opened her social media app. She hit record and instantly her face changed. The sneer vanished, replaced by a look of terrified victimhood. She pointed the camera at me, lying on the floor surrounded by the scattered records. "Guys, I am literally shaking right now," she whispered into the phone, her voice trembling with fake tears. "We are just trying to clean the house to get ready for the sale, and Tyrell's dad just attacked us. He went crazy over some old trash. He started screaming and throwing things. We are trying so hard to help him, but his dementia is getting so bad. I do not know how much more of this I can take. Please pray for us." She panned the camera to Tyrell, who immediately slumped his shoulders and looked at the floor, playing the part of the grieving son, dealing with a difficult burden. I tried to sit up, but the pain in my back was blinding. "Don't be senile, Dad," Tyrell hissed at me, not loud enough for the phone to pick up, but loud enough for me to hear every syllable. "Stop being difficult. Do not block my future. We need this money. Just stay down and let us finish." He turned away from me and started kicking the loose records toward the man with the trash bag. "Just get rid of it," he ordered. "All of it. If he wants to act like a child, treat him like one." I watched from the floor as they shoveled my life's passion into black plastic bags. The music that had gotten me through the hardest days of my life, the music I had played at my wedding, the music I had played at Esther's funeral was being hauled away like garbage. I did not try to stop them again. I realized then that physical resistance was useless. They were stronger, they were faster, and they had no conscience. If I fought them physically, they would just hurt me again and claim it was self-defense. I had to fight them a different way. I slowly pulled myself up, using the sofa for support. My hip throbbed with a dull ache, but I stood tall. I dusted off my coveralls. I looked at Tyrell, who was now busy talking to the foreman of the cleaning crew, handing him a wad of cash to speed up the process. In the chaos of the scuffle, when Tyrell had shoved me, he had dropped a leather folder he had been carrying under his arm. It had slid under the sofa when he lunged at me. He was so distracted by Courtney's live stream and the cleaning crew that he had not noticed it was gone. I waited until they were looking at the other side of the room. I bent down, groaning slightly, and retrieved the folder. It was thick and heavy. I slipped it inside my jacket, holding it against my chest. I turned and limped back toward the basement door. "Where are you going?" Courtney asked without lowering her phone. "To the basement," I said without looking back. "Out of your way." "Good," she said to her followers. "He is finally calming down. It is so hard, you guys, dealing with aggressive elderly family members. We really need a vacation after this." I closed the basement door behind me and locked it. I sat on my cot, my hands shaking, not from fear, but from a cold, calculated rage. I opened the leather folder. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. They were not fan letters. They were not job offers. The first one was on heavy red paper. It was a final notice from Chase Bank. Past due amount, $45,000. Immediate payment required to avoid legal action. The next one was from a crypto exchange platform notifying Tyrell that his margin call had been triggered and his account was liquidated. Loss $120,000. But the third document was the one that made me understand everything. It was a court summons. It was dated 2 weeks ago. The plaintiff was a private lending company, the kind that operates in the shadows and charges interest rates that are illegal in most states. The debt amount was $350,000. The document stated that Tyrell Freeman had used fraudulent collateral to secure the loan. If the debt was not paid in full by the end of the month, the company would seize all assets and pursue criminal charges for fraud. I sat there in the dim light of the basement, letting the reality sink in. Tyrell was not selling my house to buy a G-Wagon for his wife. That was just the cover story. That was the lie he told Courtney to keep her happy and distracted. He was selling my house because he was drowning. He was selling my house because he had gambled away his future, and now he was trying to steal mine to pay for it. He was facing prison time or worse from these loan sharks. He needed $2.5 million, not for a car, but for survival. And he was willing to throw his own father into a state nursing home and erase 40 years of family history to get it. I looked at the bruising starting to form on my wrist where I had hit the floor. I thought about the way he had looked at me when he pushed me. There was no love in those eyes. There was only desperation and greed. He called me senile. He said I was blocking his future. I closed the folder. I had all the ammunition I needed. He wanted a future. I would give him one, but it would not be the future he expected. I pulled out my phone and took clear photographs of every document in the folder. Then I sent them to O'Malley. I added a simple text message. He owes $350,000 to sharks. He pushed me down. The gloves are off. I hid the folder under my mattress. I laid back on the cot listening to the sounds of my house being stripped bare upstairs. Let them throw away the records. Let them paint over the walls. Let them think they have won. Because when the dust settled, they would realize that they were not standing on a gold mine. They were standing on a trapdoor. And I had just put my hand on the lever. The next morning, the sun was barely over the rooftops, but the sharks were already circling. I was out in the backyard, kneeling in the dirt. This garden was the only part of the property that Courtney and her cleaning crew had not touched yet. It was Esther's garden. She had planted heritage roses along the back fence 20 years ago. They were a rare variety, pale pink with a scent that smelled like lemons and honey. I spent 2 hours every Sunday pruning them just the way she taught me. To anyone else, they were just flowers. To me, they were the last living piece of my wife. I heard the side gate creak open. I did not look up. I knew it wasn't Tyrell because Tyrell never woke up before 10. I continued weeding, feeling the cool earth between my fingers. "Hey, buddy, can you move those trash cans? They are blocking the shot." The voice was nasally and loud. I wiped my hands on my coveralls and stood up. Standing there was a man who looked like a caricature of a real estate agent. He was wearing a navy blue suit that was too tight in the shoulders and brown loafers with no socks. His hair was gelled back so hard it looked like a plastic helmet. He was holding a tablet in one hand and a laser measuring tool in the other. This was Chad. Tyrell had mentioned him. The shark who was going to sell my life to the highest bidder. "I am not the help," I said calmly. "I am the owner." Chad looked me up and down. His eyes lingered on my stained work boots and the dirt on my knees. He let out a short, dismissive laugh. "Right. You must be Ellis. Tyrell told me about you. Look, Ellis, I am on a tight schedule. I have 3 other listings in Park Slope today, so I need you to step out of the frame. I need wide shots of the exterior, and frankly, an old man in dirty overalls does not scream luxury living." He did not offer to shake my hand. He did not introduce himself. He just walked past me, stepping directly onto a bed of marigolds I had planted last week. He crushed them under his expensive loafers without even looking down. He held up his tablet and started tapping away, scanning the backyard. He frowned. "This garden has to go," Chad announced loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "It is a disaster. It makes the yard look small and cluttered. Buyers in this market want open space. They want a patio for entertaining. They want a fire pit. They do not want a jungle." He pointed a manicured finger at Esther's roses. "Those bushes are an eyesore. They are overgrown and dated. I will tell Tyrell to have them ripped out by tomorrow. We can put down some sod or maybe pour concrete. It will increase the curb appeal by at least $50,000. My hands curled into fists at my sides. He called Esther's roses an eyesore. He wanted to pour concrete over the soil where my wife had spent her happiest hours. I felt a heat rising in my chest that had nothing to do with the morning sun. I wanted to grab him by his tight collar and throw him out of my yard. I wanted to tell him that those roses were worth more than his commission. But I remembered the folder hidden under my mattress. I remembered the debt. I remembered the plan. If I exploded now, I would lose the element of surprise. I had to play the part. I had to be the helpless old man they thought I was. "I am sorry, sir," I muttered, lowering my head. "I will try to stay out of your way." Chad did not even acknowledge me. He was already on his phone, leaving a voice note. "Backyard needs total gut job. Demo the landscaping. Schedule the dumpster for tomorrow morning." I walked back into the house, my heart pounding with a cold, rhythmic rage. They wanted to erase everything. They wanted to turn my home into a blank slate for some tech millionaire. When I entered the kitchen, the atmosphere changed from dismissive to predatory. Tyrell was sitting at the table. He was wearing a fresh shirt, but he looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot and his leg was bouncing nervously under the table. He had the look of a man who was running out of time. Courtney was standing by the window adjusting the blinds to let in more light. She turned when I walked in and flashed me a smile that was all teeth. "Good morning, Ellis," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Did you meet Chad? He is the best in the business. He is going to make us all very rich." Tyrell cleared his throat. "Dad, sit down. We need to handle some paperwork before the open house." I sat at my usual spot. In the center of the table sat a single document. It was thick, bound with a staple in the corner. Next to it was a black pen. "What is this?" I asked, keeping my voice trembling and unsure. "It is just some administrative stuff," Dad Tyrell said. He pushed the paper toward me, but he kept his hand on top of it, covering the header. "You know how expensive healthcare is getting. Courtney and I found a new insurance plan for you. It covers everything, the nursing home, your prescriptions, everything. But we need to get you enrolled today to lock in the rate." I looked at the document. I saw the legal density of the text. I saw the font size. I saw the formatting. I had signed enough contracts in my 40 years as a master electrician to know exactly what I was looking at. This was not an insurance form. This was a durable power of attorney. If I signed this, Tyrell would have total legal control over me. He could access my bank accounts. He could sell my assets without my permission. He could make medical decisions for me. He could legally lock me away in Shady Pines and strip me of everything I owned. This was the final trap. They needed this signature because without it, selling the house would take too long. They needed to bypass the legal hurdles. They needed to make me a non-entity in my own life. "Just sign at the bottom," Ellis Courtney said. She had moved closer. She was holding her phone up, pointing the camera at me. I saw the red dot recording. "Why are you filming this?" I asked. "Oh, just for memories," she lied smoothly. "It is a big day. We are taking care of you. We want to document how happy you are to be moving forward." She was building a defense. If I ever tried to claim I was coerced, she would show this video to a judge. "Look, Your Honor," he signed it willingly. We were all smiling. He was happy. I looked at Tyrell. He was sweating. He tapped the paper with his finger. "Just sign right here, Dad. Then we can get you some breakfast. You must be hungry." The threat was subtle, but it was there. Sign or starve. Sign or we make your life hell. I reached for the pen. My hand hovered over the paper. I could see the words "power of attorney" peeking out from under Tyrell's thumb. He was trying to hide it, but he was clumsy. I knew I could not sign this. If I signed my name, the game was over. They would drain my accounts before the ink was dry. But I could not just refuse. If I refused, they would know I was onto them. They would get desperate. They might get violent again. I needed time. I needed to stall them until O'Malley could execute the transfer. I picked up the pen. I let my hand shake. I made it a violent, rhythmic tremor. I had seen my own father suffer from Parkinson's in his final years. I knew exactly what it looked like. Tyrell watched my hand shaking. He looked impatient. "Steady, Dad. Come on. Just a signature." "I cannot hold it steady, son," I said, my voice cracking. "My nerves. They are bad today. I did not sleep well in the basement. It is so cold down there." Courtney let out an annoyed sigh from behind the camera. "Oh, for God's sake, Ellis, just grip the pen and write. It does not have to be perfect." I moved the pen toward the signature line. Tyrell leaned in, his eyes hungry. He was so close to getting what he wanted. He was so close to stealing $2.5 million. I reached out with my other hand as if to steady the paper, but instead my hand knocked into the mug of hot coffee that Tyrell had been drinking. It was a large, heavy ceramic mug filled to the brim. It tipped over in slow motion. The dark liquid surged across the table like a tidal wave. "Oh no," I cried out, feigning panic. The coffee hit the document. It soaked into the paper, instantly turning the white pages brown. The ink blurred. The paper turned to mush. The coffee splashed onto Tyrell's lap, soaking his expensive trousers. Tyrell jumped up, screaming, "Damn it, Dad, look what you did." He grabbed the document, trying to shake the liquid off, but it was ruined. The pages tore in his hands. It was a sodden, illegible mess. "I am sorry," I stammered, dropping the pen. "My eyes. They are so bad lately. I did not see the mug. I am just a clumsy old man." Courtney stopped recording. She lowered the phone and looked at me with pure hatred. "You did that on purpose," she hissed. I looked at her with wide, innocent eyes. Why would I do that, Courtney? I just want to sign the insurance papers. I want to be safe. Tyrell was wiping his pants with a napkin, cursing under his breath. He looked at the ruined document. We have to print another one, he said through gritted teeth. Do we have a printer? Courtney asked. No, Tyrell snapped. I packed it. It is in storage. I have to go to the copy shop down the street. He glared at me. You stay right here, old man. Do not move. I will be back in 20 minutes. And if you spill anything else on the new one, so help me God, I will throw you in the car and drive you to the shelter myself. I nodded, shrinking back into my chair. I will wait right here, son. I am sorry. Tyrell stormed out of the kitchen, slamming the door behind him. Courtney glared at me one last time, then stomped out of the room, probably to call Chad and complain about the delay. I sat alone in the kitchen, watching the puddle of coffee drip onto the floor. My hand was perfectly steady now. I picked up the napkin and wiped the table clean. 20 minutes. That was all I had bought. But 20 minutes was enough. I pulled my flip phone from my pocket. I sent a text to Sarah, my niece, who worked at the bank, the only other person besides O'Malley who knew the truth. Delay tactics successful, I typed. Document destroyed. They are printing a new one. Is the transfer complete? I waited. 3 seconds later, the phone buzzed. Transfer complete, Sarah replied. The house is no longer in your name, Ellis. The trust owns it now. Let them print whatever they want. They are trying to sell a bridge they do not own. I smiled. It was a cold, hard smile. Tyrell was running down the street to print a piece of paper that was now utterly worthless. He could force me to sign it 10 times over. It did not matter. He could not take power of attorney over assets I no longer legally possessed. I stood up and poured myself a fresh cup of coffee. I walked to the window and looked out at the garden where Chad was still shouting into his phone about destroying my roses. Enjoy the view, Chad, I whispered, because you are not going to make a dime on this sale. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now all I had to do was wait for the jaws to snap shut. A low rumble shook the front windows of my brownstone, vibrating through the glass like an approaching thunderstorm. It was not the weather. It was the sound of pure, unadulterated greed pulling up to my curb. I looked out the window and saw a matte black Mercedes G-Wagon mounting the sidewalk. It looked less like a car and more like a tank designed for urban warfare. It was aggressive, loud, and completely unnecessary for a couple who lived in Brooklyn and owed money to half the city. The driver door swung open and Courtney jumped out. She was screaming, but not in fear. She was shrieking with delight, jumping up and down on the pavement while holding her phone out to record herself. She posed next to the massive grille, kissing the Mercedes emblem. Tyrell climbed out of the passenger side. He looked pale. He was staring at the vehicle with a mixture of lust and terror. I knew exactly what he was thinking. He was thinking about the monthly payments. I had run the numbers in my head the moment I saw the dealer plates. A vehicle like that cost at least $180,000. With Tyrell's credit score, which was currently in the gutter alongside his crypto portfolio, they must have accepted a predatory interest rate. I guessed 12%, maybe even 15%. That meant monthly payments of nearly $3,000. They had bought a car that cost more per month than most people paid for rent, all based on the assumption that they would sell my house by the end of the week. They walked into the house bringing the smell of new leather and expensive perfume with them. Courtney slammed the keys onto the kitchen table right next to the coffee stain from earlier. Look at her. She breathed, her eyes wide and manic. Isn't she beautiful, Ellis? That is what success looks like. That is what we deserve. Tyrell wiped sweat from his forehead. It is an investment, Dad. The dealer gave us a great deal. We needed to project wealth to attract high-end buyers for the house. It is all part of the strategy. Strategy. My son called debt strategy. They had signed a contract they could not honor for a car they did not need to impress people they did not know. It was the definition of insanity. Courtney walked over to the window and peered out at her new toy. She frowned. There is dust on the hood, she said. The drive over here got it dirty. I cannot post pictures if it is dirty. She turned to me. Her eyes were not manic anymore. They were cold and calculating. Ellis, she said, snapping her fingers, go wash it. I blinked. Excuse me. Go wash the car, she repeated slowly as if speaking to a child. There is a bucket and a hose in the basement. You know where they are since you live down there now. I looked at Tyrell. He was looking at his shoes. Courtney, I said, my voice calm. It is 90 degrees outside. It is noon. I am 68 years old. So what, she snapped. You live here for free, Ellis. You eat our food. You take up space. You do not pay rent. You are a burden. The least you can do is contribute. If you want to eat dinner tonight, you will wash that car and make it shine. I want to see my reflection in the rims. She picked up the keys and threw them at me. They hit my chest and fell to the floor. Tyrell finally looked up. Just do it, Dad, he mumbled. It will keep you busy. You need the exercise anyway. The doctor said you need to stay active to fight the dementia. The dementia. The lie they had invented was now being used as a weapon to enslave me. I bent down and picked up the keys. The metal was heavy and cold. I did not argue. I did not fight. I simply turned and walked to the basement door. I retrieved the bucket, the sponge, and the car soap. I walked out into the blinding midday sun. The heat hit me like a physical blow. The humidity in Brooklyn in July is suffocating. The air feels thick enough to chew. I filled the bucket at the outdoor spigot. The water was lukewarm. I walked over to the G-Wagon. It sat there like a black monolith, absorbing the heat, radiating it back out. I touched the hood. It was hot enough to fry an egg. I started to wash. I soaked the sponge and squeezed it over the roof. The water ran down the sides, steaming as it hit the hot metal. My knees ached as I bent down to scrub the wheels. Sweat ran down my back, soaking my coveralls. My heart hammered in my chest. I felt dizzy. This was humiliation, plain and simple. They wanted the neighbors to see. They wanted to show the world that I was nothing more than a servant in my own kingdom. I scrubbed the front bumper. I polished the headlights. My hands were shaking not from age, but from the effort of holding back my fury. Ellis, is that you? I looked up, wiping sweat from my eyes. Standing at the fence was Mrs. Johnson. She was 72 years old, a retired school teacher who had lived next door to me since 1985. She was wearing her gardening hat and holding a watering can. Her face was twisted in horror. Ellis, what on earth are you doing? She asked. It is too hot for you to be out here. You look like you are about to pass out. I am washing my son's car, Martha, I said, my voice raspy. He asked me to. Asked you, she sputtered. Ellis, you are trembling. This is abuse. Where is Tyrell? She marched over to the property line, her eyes blazing. She had known Tyrell since he was in diapers. She had baked him cookies. She had bandaged his knees. Tyrell, she shouted toward the house. Tyrell, get your behind out here right now. The front door opened. Tyrell stepped out. He was holding a cold beer. He looked annoyed. What do you want, Mrs. Johnson? He asked rudely. I want you to have some respect, she yelled, pointing a shaking finger at him. Your father is an old man. It is 90 degrees. Get him inside and give him some water before I call the police. Tyrell laughed. It was a cruel, ugly sound. Go back inside, you old hag, he shouted back. This is none of your business. My father is fine. He needs structure. He is going senile, and if I do not give him tasks, he wanders off. I am teaching him how to be useful. I am taking care of him. Now get off my property before I sue you for harassment. Mrs. Johnson gasped. She looked at me, her eyes filling with tears. Ellis, she whispered, is this true? I looked at Tyrell standing on my porch drinking my beer, holding the deed to a car he could not afford. Then I looked at Mrs. Johnson. Go inside, Martha, I said softly. I am fine. Do not worry about me. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly, understanding that I could not speak freely. She turned and walked back to her house, but she did not go inside. She sat on her porch, rocking chair, her phone in her hand, watching over me like a guardian angel. Tyrell snorted and went back inside, slamming the door. I was alone again with the G-Wagon. My hands were raw from the soap, my back was screaming, but my mind was clear. I moved to the passenger side of the car, away from the house windows. I crouched down by the rear tire, pretending to scrub the rim. I pulled my old flip phone out of my pocket. I wiped my wet hands on my coveralls to dry them. I opened the banking app. It was a simple interface, but it controlled a fortune. I navigated to my primary checking account. The balance displayed on the small pixelated screen was $1,200,000. This was the liquid cash I had kept available for emergencies. It was the money Tyrell was counting on stealing once he forged the power of attorney. It was the money he thought would pay off the loan sharks and the G-Wagon. I selected the option for wire transfer. Destination account. The Esther Freeman Trust. Zurich, Switzerland. I typed in the amount. 1,200,000. My thumb hovered over the send button. I looked at the shiny black paint of the car. I saw my reflection. I looked old. I looked tired. I looked like a man who had been beaten down. But looks are deceiving. I pressed the button. Processing, the screen said. I dipped the sponge into the bucket and continued scrubbing the tire. Transaction complete, the phone buzzed. Current balance $0. I smiled. It was a small, grim smile. I had just bankrupted myself on paper. If Tyrell managed to get the power of attorney signed, if he managed to drag me to court, if he managed to break into my safe, he would find nothing. The well was dry. The vault was empty. He was driving a $180,000 car that was backed by absolutely nothing. He had just signed his financial death warrant. I stood up, my knees cracking. I put the phone back in my pocket. I picked up the hose and rinsed the soap off the car. The water cascaded over the black metal gleaming in the sun. It was beautiful. It was shiny. It was perfect. And it was the most expensive mistake my son had ever made. I finished washing the car. I dried it with a chamois cloth until it was spotless. Then I walked to the basement door, leaving the bucket and the sponge in the middle of the driveway. I went downstairs into the cool darkness of my cell. I sat on the cot and drank a glass of tap water. It tasted like victory. Let them enjoy the car for today. Let them drive it around the block and show it off to the neighbors. Let Courtney post her pictures. Because tomorrow, the bill would come due. And the Bank of Ellis Freeman was officially closed for business. The house did not smell like my home anymore. The scent of old books and lemon polish was gone, replaced by the cloying chemical aroma of industrial air freshener and the expensive, suffocating perfume of 50 strangers who had invaded my sanctuary. It was Friday evening. The sun had set, but inside my brownstone the lights were blazing. Courtney was throwing a party. She called it a pre-sale gala, a networking event to drum up interest for the house she did not own, but I knew what it really was. It was a victory lap. She was parading her conquests, the house, the car, and me, in front of her shallow friends to prove that she had finally made it. I was in the kitchen, washing a stack of champagne flutes that Courtney had rented for the occasion. My back was stiff from sleeping on the cot in the basement. My hands were raw from scrubbing the G-Wagon the day before. I was tired, bone-deep tired, but I was not allowed to rest. Courtney swept into the kitchen in a cloud of white chiffon. She was wearing a dress that likely cost more than my first year of college tuition. She held a garment bag in her hand. "Here," she said, tossing the bag at me. "Put this on." I caught it. "What is this?" "It is a uniform, Ellis," she said, checking her reflection in the microwave door. "I hired a catering company for the food, but they charged extra for servers. Since you are already here and eating our food, you can work for it. Put it on, and try to look less miserable. It ruins the vibe." I unzipped the bag. Inside was a white waiter's jacket and a black bow tie. It was cheap polyester, the kind that scratches your neck and smells of plastic. "You want me to serve your guests?" I asked, my voice low. "In my own house." "It is not your house anymore, Ellis," she snapped. "It is a listing, and you are not the owner tonight. You are the help. Now get changed. Guests are arriving in 10 minutes. She turned on her heel and walked out, shouting at Tyrell to adjust the lighting in the foyer. I stood there for a moment, holding the cheap jacket. I could have refused. I could have walked out the back door and spent the night at a hotel. But I needed to see this. I needed to see how far they would go. I needed to etch every single insult into my memory so that when the hammer finally fell, I would not feel a single ounce of regret. I put on the jacket. It was tight across the shoulders. I tied the bow tie. I looked at my reflection in the window. I did not look like Ellis Freeman, master electrician and homeowner. I looked like a servant. I picked up a silver tray filled with crystal glasses and walked out into the living room. The party was in full swing. The room was filled with people who looked exactly like Courtney and Tyrell, young, loud, and desperate to appear richer than they were. They were drinking champagne and eating tiny crab cakes, dropping crumbs on my Persian rug. The air was filled with the sound of forced laughter and the clinking of glass. I moved through the crowd, offering drinks. Most people did not even look at me. To them, I was just a pair of hands holding a tray. I was furniture. Then I heard Courtney's voice rising above the din. She was standing by the fireplace, holding court with a group of women who were all staring at her diamond ring. "Oh, the house has so much potential," she was saying, gesturing vaguely at the walls I had painted myself. "We are going to gut it, obviously. Open concept, minimalist. But the location is to die for. And honestly, getting the old owner out was easier than we thought. Where is he now? One of the women asked, glancing around. Courtney laughed. She pointed a manicured finger directly at me. Oh, he is still around? That is him. Ellis. We let him stay in the basement. He used to be the gardener or the handyman or something for the previous owners. He has nowhere else to go, poor thing, so we let him earn his keep. He is basically our charity case. The women turned and looked at me. Their eyes were filled with a mixture of pity and amusement. They did not see a man. They saw a pet, a stray dog that Courtney had graciously allowed to sleep in the garage. Oh, that is so sweet of you, Courtney, one of them cooed. You are such a saint. Tyrell was standing right next to her. My son, the boy I had carried on my shoulders, the boy I had taught to tie his shoes. He heard his wife call me a charity case. He heard her call me the gardener. He did not defend me. He did not correct her. He just took a sip of his drink and nodded. Yeah, he mumbled. We try to give back to the community. I gripped the silver tray so hard my knuckles turned white. The metal dug into my palms. I felt a cold fire spreading through my veins. They had stripped me of my home, my dignity, and now my identity. They had reduced 40 years of fatherhood to a lie about a homeless handyman. I turned away, my heart hammering against my ribs, and headed toward the back of the room. I needed to get away from them before I did something that would ruin the plan. But I did not get far. Hey, watch it, old man. I stopped. I had bumped into someone. It was a man I recognized from Tyrell's social media. His name was Hunter. He was a trust fund kid who pretended to be a venture capitalist. He was wearing a velvet blazer and loafers that cost $2,000. He was holding a glass of red wine. A dark stain was spreading across the sleeve of his blazer where the wine had sloshed out. You spilled my drink, he shouted, his face twisting in anger. I had not touched him. He had backed into me while taking a selfie. I am sorry, sir, I said, keeping my head down. You stepped back. Do not talk back to me, he snapped. Look what you did. This is Italian velvet. Do you have any idea how much this costs? You clumsy idiot. He looked down at his shoes. A few drops of wine had splattered onto his pristine leather loafers. And my shoes, he yelled. You ruined my shoes. The music stopped. The room went quiet. Everyone turned to look. Courtney pushed through the crowd, her face a mask of fury. What happened, she demanded. This incompetent servant spilled wine all over me, Hunter whined, pointing a finger in my face. He ruined my outfit, Courtney. Courtney turned on me. Her eyes were wide, manic. She was terrified of embarrassing herself in front of her rich friends. Ellis, she hissed, what is wrong with you? Can you not do one simple thing without messing it up? I stood there, the tray trembling in my hands. It was an accident, Courtney. He backed into me. I do not care, Courtney screamed. Apologize, right now. I apologize, sir, I said through gritted teeth. Not good enough, Hunter sneered. Look at my shoes. They are sticky. Courtney looked at Hunter's shoes, then at me. A cruel idea formed in her eyes. I saw it happen. She wanted to prove to these people that she had total control. She wanted to show them that she was the mistress of the house and I was nothing. Clean them, she said. I froze. What? Clean his shoes, she ordered, pointing at the floor. Get on your knees and clean them, now. The room was silent. I looked at Tyrell. He was standing in the corner holding a beer. He looked uncomfortable, but he did not move. He did not speak. He just watched. Tyrell, I said softly. Tyrell looked away. He took a sip of his beer and let out a nervous chuckle. Just do it, Dad, he muttered. Make it right. Do not ruin the party. That was the moment. That was the exact second the last thread of love I held for my son snapped. It didn't break with a bang. It broke with a whisper. I looked at Courtney. I looked at Hunter, who was smirking, extending his foot like a king waiting for a subject to kiss his ring. Slowly, painfully, I lowered myself to my knees. My joints cracked in the silence. I pulled a white napkin from my pocket. I reached out and wiped the drops of wine from the man's shoes. Good boy, Hunter laughed. He patted me on the head like a dog. The room erupted in laughter. It was a cruel, braying sound. They were laughing at the old man on his knees. They were laughing at the gardener. I stood up. My knees burned. My pride was ash. But my mind was crystal clear. I picked up the tray. I will get fresh drinks, I said, my voice steady. I turned and walked into the kitchen. The laughter followed me, echoing off the walls I had built. I set the tray down on the counter. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline. On the counter sat a bottle of wine. It was a Chateau Margaux, vintage 2005. It was the crown jewel of the wine cellar Tyrell had raided earlier. That bottle was worth $5,000. It was a gift from a client I had wired a factory for 20 years ago. I had been saving it for Tyrell's wedding, but Courtney had refused to drink red wine at the reception, so it had stayed in the cellar. They had opened it tonight to impress their friends. It was half full. I picked up the bottle. I looked at the dark, rich liquid. It represented everything they wanted to be. Refined, expensive, valuable. I walked to the sink and poured the wine down the drain. $5,000 of vintage Bordeaux swirled away into the sewer. It gurgled as it vanished. I put the empty bottle on the counter. I opened the fridge. I took out a jug of generic grape juice, the kind I bought for $3 a gallon. I poured it into the crystal decanter. Then I opened the cabinet under the sink. I pushed aside the cleaning supplies until I found a bottle of rubbing alcohol. I uncorked it. The smell was sharp and chemical. I poured a generous splash into the grape juice. Not enough to kill, just enough to burn, just enough to taste like poison. I swirled the decanter, mixing the purple sludge. Then I poured the mixture back into the empty Chateau Margaux bottle. I placed the bottle on my tray along with fresh glasses. I adjusted my bow tie. I looked at my reflection in the microwave. The servant was gone. The Avenger was here. I walked back out into the party. I approached Hunter first. He was still laughing, recounting the story of how he made the old man kneel. "Compliments of the house, sir," I said, offering him the bottle. "A very rare vintage. The best we have." Hunter's eyes lit up when he saw the label. "Chateau Margaux," he exclaimed. "Now this is what I am talking about. Finally, some class." I poured a glass for him. I poured one for Courtney. I poured one for Tyrell. They raised their glasses. To the new house Courtney toasted, and to getting rid of the old trash. They clinked glasses and drank. I watched them. I waited for the grimace. I waited for them to spit it out. It was grape juice and rubbing alcohol. It should have tasted vile. Hunter took a large swallow. He swished it around in his mouth. He swallowed. He closed his eyes and sighed. "Incredible," he said. "You can really taste the oak. The tannins are exquisite, smooth, very smooth." Courtney took a sip. She nodded vigorously, desperate to agree. "Oh, wow," she said. "It is so complex. You can taste the berries." "This is amazing, Ellis. Why were you hiding this?" Tyrell drank his. He looked at me, confused for a second, but then he saw Hunter and Courtney praising it, so he smiled. "Yeah. Great stuff, Dad. Really top shelf." They stood there, drinking $3 juice mixed with medical disinfectant, praising it as if it were nectar from the gods. They swirled it. They sniffed it. They acted like connoisseurs. I stood there holding the tray and I almost laughed. They were fake. All of them. They did not know quality. They did not know value. They only knew labels. They only knew what they were told was expensive. They were drinking poison and calling it ambrosia because the bottle said it was worth $5,000. I realized then that destroying them would be easier than I thought. They were hollow. They were shells. "Enjoy," I said softly. "Drink up. There is plenty more where that came from." I walked away, leaving them to their poison. I went back to the kitchen and took off the white jacket. I threw it in the trash can right on top of the food scraps. I went down to the basement and lay on my cot. Above me, I could hear them laughing and cheering, getting drunk on their own pretension. Let them have their party. Let them have their fake wine. Tomorrow, the hangover was going to be catastrophic. The headache from the fake wine must have been splitting because Tyrell looked like death warmed over. It was Saturday morning and the house smelled of stale alcohol and desperation. I was in the kitchen boiling water for tea when the front door opened. Tyrell walked in, followed by a man who looked about as much like a doctor as I looked like a ballerina. The man was short and sweaty, wearing a gray suit that had seen better days. He carried a battered leather briefcase and smelled faintly of menthol cigarettes and cheap cologne. His eyes darted around the room, assessing the value of the furniture before they landed on me. Dad Tyrell said, his voice tight with tension. "This is Dr. Cronenberg. Since you had that accident with the coffee yesterday and your hands were shaking so bad, Courtney and I thought it would be best to have a specialist come take a look at you. We are worried about your cognitive decline." Cognitive decline. It was a fancy way of saying they wanted a medical professional to sign a piece of paper declaring me incompetent so they could bypass my signature and sell the house from under me. It was Plan B. Dr. Cronenberg offered me a hand that felt like a dead fish. "Mr. Freeman," he said. His voice was oily. "I understand you have been experiencing confusion, memory loss, and tremors. Is that correct?" I looked at his hand but did not shake it. "I am perfectly fine," I said. Tyrell stepped in. "He is in denial, doctor. That is part of the disease. Just yesterday he forgot who I was for a moment. He spilled hot coffee all over the table because he could not control his limbs. Please, just do the evaluation." Courtney was standing in the doorway, her arms crossed. She was not recording this time. This was off the books. This was a transaction. I saw Tyrell slip a white envelope into the doctor's pocket. It was thick. Dr. Cronenberg sat at the kitchen table and opened his briefcase. He pulled out a clipboard and a pen. "Sit down, Mr. Freeman. This will not take long. We just need to establish a baseline for your competency." I sat down. I smoothed the front of my coveralls. I looked at Tyrell. He was bouncing on the balls of his feet, practically vibrating with anxiety. He needed this diagnosis. He needed it today. The loan sharks were calling. I had seen the missed calls on his phone screen when he left it on the counter. "Let us begin," Dr. Cronenberg said, clicking his pen. "Mr. Freeman, do you know what year it is?" I looked at him. 2024, I said. Tyrell coughed loudly. "Are you sure, Dad? Think carefully." He was trying to gaslight me in real time. He wanted me to doubt my own mind. "I am sure, son," I said without looking at him. The doctor scribbled something down. He did not look happy that I got it right. "Okay, next question. Can you count backwards from 100 by sevens?" It was a standard cognitive test. 93, I said. 86, 79, 72, 65, 58. I recited the numbers with the rhythm of a metronome. I had spent 40 years calculating voltage drops and circuit loads in my head. Mathematics was my second language. Tyrell interrupted me. "He skipped one, doctor. Did you hear that? He skipped 51. I stopped. I looked at Tyrell. 51 is not part of that sequence, son, I said calmly. 65 minus 7 is 58. 58 minus 7 is 51. Wait, no. 58 minus 7 is 51. I paused, pretending to be confused. Tyrell's eyes lit up. "See, he is confused. He does not know what he is saying." I smiled. "Actually," I said, correcting myself, "I was testing you, Tyrell. 58 minus 7 is 51. But I stopped at 58 because I was boring the doctor." Cronenberg frowned. "Mr. Freeman, please focus. Who is the current president of the United States?" I answered him. Then I added the vice president, the Speaker of the House, and the Secretary of State. Tyrell looked furious. He leaned over the doctor's shoulder. "Ask him about his wife. Ask him where she is. He thinks she is still alive sometimes." This was a low blow. A cruel, desperate lie. Dr. Cronenberg looked at me. "Mr. Freeman, where is your wife, Esther?" I felt a sharp pain in my chest, but I kept my face like stone. "My wife, Esther, passed away 5 years ago from pancreatic cancer. She is buried at Cypress Hills Cemetery, plot number 412, row B. I visit her every Sunday." The doctor stopped writing. He looked at Tyrell. "He seems fully oriented to time, place, and person, Mr. Freeman." Tyrell slammed his hand on the table. "He is faking it. He has moments of clarity, but then he loses it. Ask him about the house. Ask him why he thinks he is a gardener." Cronenberg sighed. He looked at his watch. "Mr. Freeman, your son claims you have delusions about your identity and your assets. Do you know who owns this house?" I leaned forward. I rested my elbows on the table. I looked deep into Dr. Cronenberg's watery eyes. "I own this house," I said. "Just like I own the patents for the Freeman circuit breaker system utilized in 3,000 factories across the Midwest. Just like I own a memory that is sharp enough to remember faces I have seen on the news." Cronenberg blinked. "What are you talking about?" I lowered my voice to a whisper, intimate and terrifying. "I am talking about you, doctor, or should I say, Mr. Cronenberg, because I have a hobby. I read the state medical board disciplinary reports. It keeps my mind sharp." I saw the color drain from his face. His pen stopped moving. "You lost your medical license in 2019. I continued, my voice steady and cold. "You were running a pill mill out of a clinic in Queens. Opioids, prescribing oxycodone to addicts for cash. You were indicted, but you took a plea deal to avoid jail time. Permanent revocation of license. You are not a doctor. You are a fraud. and practicing medicine without a license is a felony. Tyrell froze. He looked from me to the doctor. What? What is he talking about? Cronenberg stood up so fast his chair tipped over. He grabbed his briefcase. His hands were shaking violently now. I told you this was a bad idea, he hissed at Tyrell. You said he was senile. You said he was a vegetable. I am not a vegetable, I said, remaining seated. But you are about to be a prisoner again if you do not walk out that door in the next 10 seconds. I have a security camera in the corner. This entire evaluation has been recorded. It was a bluff. There was no camera in the kitchen yet. But Cronenberg did not know that. Panic is a powerful motivator. He did not even say goodbye. He scrambled for the door, dropping his pen in the process. He ran out of the house as if the devil himself were chasing him. The front door slammed shut. Silence filled the kitchen. Tyrell stood there, staring at the empty space where his hired gun had been. His face turned a deep shade of purple. The veins in his neck bulged. He turned to me. His eyes were wild. You ruined it, he screamed. You ruined everything. He grabbed the flower vase from the center of the table. It was a cheap glass thing Courtney had bought for the staging. He hurled it against the wall. It shattered into 1,000 pieces, sending glass and water flying across the room. Why won't you just die? He yelled. Why do you have to be so difficult? We need this money. We need it now. He kicked a chair, sending it skittering across the floor. He punched the refrigerator, leaving a dent in the stainless steel. He was having a tantrum, a meltdown of a man who had never been told no in his life and was now facing the consequences of his own incompetence. I sat there calm and unmoving. I took a sip of my tea. Clean that up, Tyrell, I said softly. It is dangerous to leave broken glass on the floor. Someone might get hurt. He looked at me, breathing heavily, his chest heaving. For a second, I thought he was going to hit me again. I saw him calculate it. But then he remembered the camera I had mentioned. He looked at the corner of the room, searching for the lens that wasn't there. Fear replaced the rage. He stormed out of the room, leaving the mess behind. I heard him running up the stairs, shouting for Courtney. I finished my tea. Then I stood up and got the broom. I swept up the glass. I righted the chair. They were getting desperate. And desperate men make mistakes. Tyrell had just admitted he needed the money. He had just brought a criminal into my house. I went back to the basement and pulled out my notebook. I wrote down the date and time, attempted medical fraud, unlicensed practitioner, verbal assault, property damage. I was building a file. And it was getting thicker by the hour. My son wanted to declare me incompetent. Instead, he had just handed me the hammer to nail his own coffin shut. It was Sunday afternoon, and the house was quiet for the first time in days. Tyrell had left an hour ago, claiming he had an urgent meeting with a potential cash buyer, but I knew better. I had seen the location tracker on the family plan pinging from a dive bar 3 blocks away. He was drinking his anxiety away, terrified that his house of cards was about to collapse. That left me alone in the house with the Viper. Courtney was in the sunroom at the back of the house. It was her favorite spot because the lighting was perfect for her selfies and the Wi-Fi signal was strongest there. I was in the laundry room right next door, ostensibly fixing a leaking drain pipe behind the utility sink. The reality was that the pipe had a hairline fracture I had been meaning to fix for months, but today it served a different purpose. It gave me a reason to be invisible. It gave me a reason to be silent. And it put me exactly 3 feet away from Courtney, separated only by a thin sheet of drywall and a ventilation grate that I had quietly unscrewed years ago to improve airflow. I lay on my back on the cold tile floor, staring up at the underside of the sink. I held a pipe wrench in my hand, but I did not move. I hardly dared to breathe. Through the vent, Courtney's voice drifted in crystal clear. She was not talking to her followers this time. Her voice lacked that fake, high-pitched enthusiasm she used for Instagram. This was her real voice. It was low, flat, and dripping with contempt. She was on the phone with her mother. I knew it was her mother because Courtney only used a specific tone of whining entitlement with 2 people. Me and the woman who raised her. "Mom, you have to stop worrying," she said. "The paperwork is almost done. Tyrell is running around like a headless chicken trying to finalize the deal with the investor. He is so pathetic when he is stressed. He sweats through his shirts. It is disgusting." I gripped the wrench tighter. She spoke about her husband, my son, as if he were a stain on her designer dress. "Yes, I know the timeline," she continued. "We sell the house by Tuesday. We get the cash wire by Wednesday. It should be around $1.8 million after we pay off the expedited fees. I know it is below market value, but we need the liquid cash now." She paused, listening to her mother. Then she laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. No, Mom, you are not listening. I am not staying with him. Are you crazy? I have stuck it out this long only because I knew the old man was sitting on a gold mine. I earned this payout. I lived in this dusty museum. I ate their greasy food. I let Tyrell touch me. I deserve every penny. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I had always known she was greedy. I had always known she was manipulative, but I had assumed in some small corner of my heart that she at least tolerated my son. I thought there was some affection there, however twisted. But there was nothing. Tyrell was just a mark. He was a long con. The conversation continued, and every word was a revelation. Here is the plan, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The money hits the joint account on Wednesday. I have already opened a separate account in the Cayman Islands under my maiden name. As soon as the transfer clears, I am moving 50% of the funds, $900,000. That is my cut. She paused again. Then she said something that made me freeze. I do not care what happens to him, Mom. He can have the other half to pay off his gambling debts or whatever. He is going to be broke in a year anyway. He is weak. He has no vision. He is just like his father. Useless. Once I have my share, I am filing for divorce on grounds of irreconcilable differences. I already have the papers drafted. I closed my eyes. My son was risking prison for this woman. He was willing to institutionalize his own father for this woman. He was selling his soul for a woman who was planning to rob him blind and leave him in the gutter before the ink on the check was dry. But she was not finished. The knife had been inserted, but now she was going to twist it. And Mom, you will never guess who is waiting for me in Miami, she giggled. Jax. Yes, the trainer from Equinox, the one with the tattoos. He has been texting me all week. He is moving to South Beach to open a gym, and he wants me to come with him. He says I am his muse. She sighed wistfully. It will be so nice to be with a real man for a change, someone who takes care of his body. Tyrell is getting soft. He smells like stress and cheap beer. I can barely stand to sleep in the same bed as him. Last night he tried to hug me and I almost threw up. I told him I had a migraine just to get him to roll over. I lay on the tiles listening to her describe her infidelity with the casualness of someone ordering a coffee. She was cheating on him. Not only was she stealing his inheritance, she was cheating on him with a gym trainer while Tyrell was out trying to secure her future. Jack says the G-Wagon will look great in Miami, she added. I am taking the car too, obviously. Tyrell can keep the debt. It is in his name anyway. I had heard enough. I had heard everything I needed to hear. My hand moved slowly to my pocket. I pulled out my phone. I pressed the voice memo app. It was a simple function, but effective. I held the phone up toward the vent. Say that again, Mom, Courtney said. No, he does not suspect a thing. He thinks we are building an empire together. He is so stupid it is almost sad. He actually thinks I love him. Can you believe it? The little red waveform on my screen jumped with every word recording her confession in high-definition digital audio. I let it run for another 2 minutes, capturing every detail of her exit strategy. She laid it all out. The offshore account. The divorce lawyer she had already retained. The plane tickets to Miami she had booked for Thursday morning. When she finally hung up, I stopped the recording. I saved the file under a folder named The Truth. I lay there in the silence of the laundry room, staring at the copper pipes above me. I held the phone in my hand. It was heavy with the weight of my son's destruction. For a moment, a brief, fleeting moment, I felt a surge of paternal instinct. I thought about Tyrell sitting in that dive bar, terrified and alone, drinking beer he could not afford, thinking he was doing all of this for love. I thought about the boy who used to cry when he scraped his knee. I could go to him. I could drive to the bar right now. I could play him this recording. I could show him that the woman he was destroying his family for was a monster. I could save him from the divorce. I could save him from the humiliation. If I showed him this, he might stop the sale. He might kick her out. We could maybe salvage something from the wreckage. I started to sit up. I put my hand on the floor to push myself up, and then a sharp pain shot through my hip. It was the same hip I had landed on when Tyrell pushed me. I froze. I remembered the look in his eyes when he shoved me to the floor. I remembered the way he had stood over me, not with concern, but with annoyance. I remembered him calling me senile. I remembered him telling the doctor to declare me incompetent. He had made his choice. He had chosen her over me. He had chosen greed over blood. If I saved him now, he would not learn. He would cry, he would apologize, and then 6 months from now he would find another Courtney. He would find another get-rich-quick scheme. He would come back for the rest of my money. He was weak because I had always saved him. I had paid his tuition when he failed classes. I had paid his rent when he got fired. I had fixed his car when he wrecked it. I had created this monster by shielding him from the consequences of his own actions. I laid back down on the cold floor. I gripped the phone tight. "No," I whispered to the empty room. "Not this time." He needed to fall. He needed to hit the bottom so hard that it shattered every illusion he had ever held. He needed to feel the pain of betrayal just as I had felt it. He needed to stand in the ruins of his life and realize that he was the one who held the sledgehammer. I would not show him the recording. Not yet. I would keep it safe. I would let him sell the house. I would let him hand over the keys. I would let him think he had won. And then when he was standing at the summit of his victory, I would let Courtney push him off the edge, because that was the only way he would ever learn to fly. I put the phone back in my pocket. I picked up the wrench and banged it against the pipe a few times, making it sound like I was working. "Is that you?" Ellis Courtney shouted from the other room, her voice back to its usual imperious tone. "Keep it down in there. I am trying to focus." "I am sorry, Courtney," I called back, my voice steady and devoid of mercy. "Just fixing the drain." It was clogged with filth. I tightened the bolt one last time. The leak was fixed, but the flood was just beginning. The darkness did not fall slowly like the setting sun. It happened with the sharp mechanical snap of a circuit breaker being thrown, followed immediately by the silence of the furnace dying. I was sitting on my cot in the basement reading a book by the light of a single bare bulb when the world suddenly went black. I sat there in the dark waiting for the power to come back on, thinking perhaps a fuse had blown, but then I heard the heavy turn of the deadbolt at the top of the stairs. It was a deliberate metallic sound that echoed through the concrete walls like a prison sentence. I stood up and felt my way to the utility sink in the corner. I turned the handle. The pipes groaned and spat a burst of air, but no water came out. They had shut off the main valve. This was not a power outage. This was a siege. For the next 48 hours, I lived in a cold black box. The temperature in the basement dropped rapidly. Without the furnace running, the damp chill of the earth seeped through the foundation. I wrapped myself in Esther's wool coat, shivering uncontrollably, my breath forming clouds in the beam of my small flip phone screen, which I only dared to turn on for seconds at a time to check the hour. The hunger was a dull ache in my stomach, but the thirst was agony. My tongue felt like sandpaper. My lips cracked and bled. Upstairs, I could hear the sounds of life. I heard the television blaring. I heard the microwave beeping. I heard the distinct sound of water running through the pipes overhead, taunting me as Courtney took a long, hot shower while I sat in the dark, licking my cracked lips. They were trying to break me. They were using the oldest torture method in the world: deprivation. They wanted me weak. They wanted me confused. They wanted me desperate enough to sign anything just for a glass of water. I spent the hours in a meditative trance. I thought about the men and women who came before me, my ancestors who had endured chains and whips and scorching sun in cotton fields. They had survived so that I could exist. Compared to what they suffered, a cold basement and a thirsty throat were nothing. I drew strength from their memory. I slowed my breathing. I conserved my energy. I did not bang on the door. I did not beg. I simply waited. On the second night, the smell of roasting chicken drifted down through the floorboards. It was a rich, savory scent that made my stomach cramp with violence. I heard them eating. I heard Courtney laughing. "He has been quiet all day," Tyrell said, his voice muffled by the floor. "Do you think he is okay?" "He is fine," Courtney replied, her mouth full. "He is just stubborn. He will break. Old people cannot handle the cold. Once he signs, we will give him some soup and send him to Shady Pines. They have heat there." I lay in the dark, clutching the leather folder of their debts against my chest. They were eating roast chicken while their father starved beneath their feet. The cruelty was absolute. It was pure. And it hardened my resolve into something unbreakable. On the morning of the third day, the lock turned. The door at the top of the stairs swung open. The light from the hallway was blinding. I squinted, shielding my eyes with a trembling hand. Tyrell stood in the doorway. He was silhouetted against the light like an avenging angel, but he looked like a devil. He was wearing a heavy winter coat and gloves, even though he was inside the house. He held a flashlight in one hand and a stack of papers in the other. "Get up," he barked. I tried to stand, but my legs were weak. I stumbled and had to grab the edge of the cot to keep from falling. I was shivering violently now, the cold having settled deep into my bones. Water. I croaked, my voice barely a whisper. Please, son. Water. Sign first, Tyrell said, walking down the stairs. He stopped a few feet away from me. He shone the flashlight directly into my face, blinding me. He did not offer me a hand. He did not ask if I was hurt. He just threw the papers at me. They hit my chest and scattered onto the dirty floor. Sign the papers. Ellis Courtney's voice floated down from the top of the stairs. We do not have all day. The buyer is waiting. I knelt on the cold concrete, trying to gather the pages with my numb fingers. It was the deed transfer. It was a quitclaim deed relinquishing all my rights to the property to Tyrell Freeman for the sum of $1. You cannot do this, I whispered, looking up at him. This is illegal. This is inhuman. Tyrell kicked the cot, sending it crashing against the wall. Do not talk to me about laws, he shouted, his voice echoing in the small space. You forced me to do this, Dad. You and your stubborn pride. You think you are better than me. You think I am a failure. Well, look at you now, shivering in the dark like a rat. Who is the failure now? He pulled a pen from his pocket and clicked it. Sign it, he ordered. Sign it right now or so. Help me, God, I will drag you out the back door and leave you in the park. It is snowing outside, Dad. A blizzard is coming tonight. Do you think you will survive a night on a park bench in this condition? Do you think anyone will care about a frozen old man? I looked at his face. His eyes were wide and bloodshot. He was terrified. The loan sharks must have given him a deadline. He was projecting his fear onto me, turning it into rage. I reached for the pen. My hand was shaking uncontrollably, not an act this time, but a genuine reaction to the cold and the weakness. I cannot see, I murmured. It is too dark. Tyrell grabbed my shoulder and hauled me up. He dragged me to the bottom of the stairs where the light from the hallway spilled down. He shoved the papers against the wall. Sign, he hissed, putting the pen in my hand. I held the pen. I looked at the line that said, Grantor signature. If I signed this, Tyrell would think he owned the house. He would run to the investor. He would take the money. He would pay off the G-Wagon. He would think he had won. But he did not know about the trust. He did not know that 3 days ago, I had legally transferred the title of this house to the Esther Freeman Trust. Ellis Freeman, the individual, no longer owned this property. Ellis Freeman could sign 1,000 deeds, and they would all be worthless because Ellis Freeman had nothing to give. But I had to make it look real. I had to make him believe. I pressed the pen to the paper. I let my hand tremble violently. I wrote the letter E, then a period, then Freeman, E. Freeman. It was not my legal signature. My legal signature was Ellis J. Freeman. It was the signature I used on checks, on contracts, on the trust documents. This signature was a ghost. It was a shorthand. It was the signature of a man under duress, signing a name that held no legal weight over the property in question. I finished the scrawl. The pen slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the concrete. There I whispered, sliding down the wall to sit on the floor. It is done. Tyrell snatched the papers from the wall. He did not check the signature. He did not check the date. He just saw ink on the line. He saw $2.5 million. He let out a whoop of joy that sounded obscene in the cold basement. Yes, he screamed. Finally, he turned and ran up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. Courtney, look, he shouted. He signed it. We are rich, baby. We are rich. Courtney appeared at the top of the stairs. She snatched the papers from him and scanned them quickly. A smile spread across her face, a smile so greedy and triumphant it made her look hideous. Oh my God, she squealed. Call Chad. Call the investor. Tell them we are ready to close. We need that wire transfer today. They hugged each other, jumping up and down in the hallway. They were celebrating their victory, dancing on the grave of my dignity. Hey, Dad, Tyrell shouted down the stairs, not bothering to come back down. I turned the water back on. You can drink from the sink. We are going out to celebrate. Do not wait up. He slammed the door shut. I heard the lock click. They left me there. They had what they wanted. I was no longer a threat. I was no longer an obstacle. I was just refuse to be discarded later. I crawled to the utility sink. I turned the handle. The pipes shuddered, and a stream of rusty water sputtered out. I cupped my hands and drank. It tasted of iron and dirt, but it was the sweetest thing I had ever tasted. I drank until my stomach hurt. Then I sat back against the wall, wrapped in Esther's coat. They were opening champagne upstairs. I heard the pop. I heard the music start. They were toasting to their crime. They were toasting to the G-Wagon, to the Miami trip, to the divorce Courtney was planning. They did not look at the signature. They did not verify the title. They were so blinded by greed that they had missed the most important detail. I touched the pocket of my coveralls where my phone was hidden. I had recorded everything: the threats, the coercion, the admission that they were starving me. I had signed E. Freeman, E for end, E for eviction, E for empty, because that was exactly what they were going to be left with. I closed my eyes and allowed myself a moment of rest. The physical torture was over. The legal trap was sprung. Now came the final act. I waited for the sound of the front door opening and closing as they left for their victory dinner. When silence finally fell over the house, I stood up. I was weak, but I was not broken. I walked to the basement door. They had unlocked it in their haste to celebrate. I pushed it open and walked into my hallway. I went to the kitchen. I opened the fridge and took out the container of gumbo I had frozen days ago. I put it in the microwave. I sat at the head of my table and ate my wife's soup. It warmed me from the inside out. Then I picked up my phone and dialed O'Malley. "They have the paper," I said. "They are going to the closing tomorrow." "Excellent," O'Malley said. "Sarah is ready. The trust officers are ready. And Ellis, the police have seen the videos you sent. They are waiting for the final transaction to take place so they can nail them for grand larceny and fraud." "Good," I said. "Make sure the investor is there. Make sure Chad is there. I want a full audience. I will see you tomorrow, Ellis. Get some sleep." I hung up. I looked around my kitchen. The walls were bare. The furniture was gone. But the soul of the house was still here. Tomorrow I would wear my best suit. Tomorrow I would walk into that closing not as a victim, but as the executioner. Tyrell thought he had forced me to sign away my life. He did not know that he had just signed his own confession. The ink was dry, the die was cast, and the house always wins. The ink on the fraudulent deed was barely dry when Tyrell ran out of the house like a man possessed. He clutched the folder to his chest as if it contained the Holy Grail instead of his own father's betrayal. I watched him go from the basement window, my body still aching from the cold and the hunger. He jumped into the G-Wagon and sped off, leaving tire marks on the pavement. He was heading straight to Chad's office. I knew exactly what was going to happen next because I had predicted every move of this desperate dance. An hour later, I received a text from O'Malley. He had a contact inside the real estate firm, a young paralegal who owed him a favor. The text was short. Deal closed. $1.8 million, cash. Closing in 48 hours. I let out a slow breath. $1.8 million. My house was worth $2.5 million easily in the current market. Tyrell had just undersold his inheritance by $700,000 because he needed the cash immediately. He had let the shark smell blood in the water. I could imagine the scene in Chad's glass-walled office. Tyrell sweating in his cheap suit, handing over the papers with my shaky signature. Chad looking at them with dollar signs in his eyes, not caring that the signature looked like it belonged to a stroke victim. And the investor, the shark, sitting across the table, smiling like a crocodile. He knew he was robbing a desperate man. He knew he was getting a prime Brooklyn brownstone for pennies on the dollar. They probably shook hands. They probably laughed. Tyrell probably thought he was a genius business mogul. He had just secured the money to pay off his gambling debts and keep his wife. He thought he was free. He did not know that the paper he had handed over was worthless. He did not know that he had just sold a property that belonged to a trust fund to a man who would likely break his legs when he found out he had been scammed. Tyrell came back 2 hours later. He was practically vibrating with adrenaline. He slammed the front door and shouted for Courtney. "Baby, we did it!" he yelled, his voice echoing through the floorboards. "It is done. The money hits the account on Thursday." I heard Courtney scream with delight. I heard the sound of her running down the hallway. $1.8 million, she shrieked. "We are rich, Tyrell. We are actually rich." They did not mention me. They did not come down to the basement to offer me food or water now that they had what they wanted. I was a loose end that had been tied off. But Courtney was not satisfied with just the money. She wanted to erase every trace of me from the house before the new owner took possession. She wanted to prove that this was her victory. I heard a loud crash from the kitchen, then another. It sounded like a sledgehammer hitting drywall. I pulled myself up from the cot and walked to the stairs. I climbed them slowly, my hand gripping the rail. I pushed open the door to the hallway. The scene in the kitchen was a nightmare. Courtney was wearing safety goggles and holding a large sledgehammer she must have found in my tool shed. She was swinging it at the wall that separated the kitchen from the dining room. Open concept, she yelled, swinging the hammer. Bam! Plaster dust exploded into the air. Bam! The lath splintered. She was destroying the wall I had built with my own hands in 1985. I had framed that wall. I had hung the drywall. I had sanded it until it was smooth as glass. Tyrell was sitting on the counter drinking a beer, cheering her on. "Break it down, babe," he shouted. "Tear it all down. Get rid of the old man's stench." Courtney stopped to catch her breath. Her face was flushed with exertion and malice. She looked around the room, searching for something else to destroy. Her eyes landed on the mantel above the fireplace. There, sitting in a silver frame, was the only photograph I had left of my wedding day. It was black and white. Esther was smiling, looking beautiful in her lace dress. I was looking at her like she was the only woman in the world. It was the anchor of my life. Courtney walked over to the mantel. She picked up the frame. "God, this thing is so depressing," she said, wrinkling her nose. "Look at her dress. It is hideous. And look at you, Ellis. You looked like a loser even back then." "Put it down, Courtney," I said from the doorway. My voice was quiet, but it carried across the room. She spun around. She looked surprised to see me standing there, but she did not look afraid. She smiled. "Oh, look who decided to join the party," she said. "The ghost of Christmas past." "Put the picture down," I repeated. "That is all I have left of her." Courtney looked at the photo, then at me. A cruel light flickered in her eyes. "This house needs to be staged," she said. "We cannot have personal items cluttering the space. It is bad luck. This thing is cursed. It is the reason you are such a miserable old man." She held the frame out at arm's length. "No," I said, stepping forward. She dropped it. It fell in slow motion. It hit the hearthstones. The glass shattered with a sharp explosive sound. The silver frame bent. The photograph face down lay among the shards. "Oops," she said, covering her mouth with a mock expression of shock. My hand slipped. Tyrell laughed. He actually laughed. It was a nervous sound, but it was a laugh. Courtney kicked the shards with her boot. "Clean that up, Ellis," she said. "And then get back in your hole. The new owner is coming for a final walkthrough tomorrow, and I do not want to see your face." She turned back to the wall and swung the hammer again. I stood there looking at the broken glass. I looked at the back of the photograph. I looked at my son, who was opening another beer, oblivious to the fact that he had just desecrated his mother's memory. Something inside me went cold. It was the final death of hope. Until that moment, a tiny foolish part of me had hoped they might show a flicker of humanity. I had hoped that once they got what they wanted, they might soften. But there was no softness in them. They were hollow creatures filled with nothing but appetite. I walked over to the hearth. I knelt down. I picked up the photograph, shaking off the glass shards. Esther's face was scratched but still smiling. I wiped the dust from it with my sleeve. I put it in my pocket next to my heart. Then I picked up the pieces of glass one by one. I did not cut myself. My hands were leather. I put the shards in the trash can. I did not say a word. I did not look at them. I turned and walked back to the basement. I sat on my cot. I took out my flip phone. I dialed O'Malley's number. "It is time," I said. "Are you ready?" Ellis O'Malley asked. "I am ready," I replied. "Bring the buyer," I said. "Bring the papers. Meet us at the notary office tomorrow at 10. I hung up. I listened to the sound of the sledgehammer destroying my kitchen. Bam, bam, bam. Let her break the walls. Let her raise the dust. Tomorrow they were going to walk into a room thinking they were kings, and they were going to walk out in handcuffs. The house was sold, but not to the shark. It belonged to Esther now, and Esther was angry. The notary office smelled of expensive leather and old money. It was located on the 45th floor of a glass tower in downtown Brooklyn, overlooking the city that had chewed me up and spat me out 1,000 times but never managed to break me. Tyrell and Courtney were sitting at the head of the conference table, vibrating with nervous energy. Tyrell was wearing his best suit, though I noticed the hem was coming undone, a perfect metaphor for his life. Courtney was scrolling through her phone, probably picking out filters for her just-sold selfie. Next to them sat Chad, the weasel realtor, tapping his foot impatiently. And across from them sat the shark. His name was Victor, a man with cold eyes and a smile that looked like a scar. He was dressed in black from head to toe and had 2 silent associates standing by the door. This was the man Tyrell had sold his soul to for fast cash. I sat in the corner, far away from the action, wearing my old Sunday suit. It was 20 years old, slightly frayed at the cuffs, and smelled of mothballs and lavender. To them, I was just a prop, a necessary inconvenience to make the paperwork legal. They ignored me completely, which was exactly what I wanted. The notary, a stern woman named Mrs. Higgins with glasses perched on the end of her nose, walked in carrying a thick file. She sat down at the head of the table, adjusting her spectacles. "All right, gentlemen, let us get this over with," she said, her voice dry as dust. "We are here to execute the sale of the property located at 412 Decatur Street. The buyer is Mr. Victor Kane. The seller is represented by Mr. Tyrell Freeman via power of attorney granted by Mr. Ellis Freeman." She opened the file and began sorting through the documents. Tyrell leaned forward, his hands gripping the edge of the mahogany table. "Is everything in order?" he asked, his voice cracking slightly. "We need the wire transfer to clear today." Mrs. Higgins didn't look up. She was examining the deed transfer document, the one I had signed in the cold basement, with a shaking hand. She frowned. She held the paper up to the light. Then she pulled out a magnifying glass. The room went silent. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning and Tyrell's ragged breathing. "Mr. Freeman," Mrs. Higgins said slowly, looking over her glasses at my son, "there is a problem with this signature." Tyrell's face went pale. "What problem?" "It is my father's signature. He signed it right in front of me. I have video proof if you need it." Mrs. Higgins shook her head. "It is not the handwriting that concerns me, Mr. Freeman. It is the name." She turned the document around so everyone could see. She pointed a manicured finger at the signature line. "The grantor has signed as E. Freeman," she said. "However, the legal owner of record for this property is listed as Ellis James Freeman. In a transaction of this magnitude, the signatures must match the deed exactly. This document is technically invalid." Victor the Shark slammed his hand on the table. "Are you kidding me? I brought cash. I want my keys. Fix it." Tyrell jumped up, sweat beading on his forehead. "It is fine. It is just an abbreviation. Dad, get over here. Sign it again. Sign it properly this time." He turned to me, his eyes wild with panic. "Get up, old man. Do not ruin this for me. Sign the paper." I stayed seated. I crossed my legs and smoothed the crease in my trousers. I looked at Tyrell, then at Victor, then at Courtney, whose mouth was hanging open in horror. "I cannot sign it, Tyrell," I said softly. "What do you mean you cannot sign it?" he screamed, lunging toward me. "You will sign it or I will break your fingers." "Sit down, Mr. Freeman," Mrs. Higgins barked, her voice cutting through the tension like a whip. "Or I will call security." Tyrell froze. He looked at the shark, who was now glaring at him with murder in his eyes. "Why can he not sign it?" Chad asked, finally speaking up. "He is right here. He is competent enough to hold a pen. Just let him sign a new deed." Mrs. Higgins looked down at her computer screen. She typed something rapidly. Her frown deepened. "Actually," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "he cannot sign a new deed either." "Why not?" Courtney shrieked. "Why not?" "Because," Mrs. Higgins said, looking directly at Tyrell, "according to the county clerk's database, which was updated this morning, Mr. Ellis Freeman is no longer the owner of the property." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb falling before the explosion. "What?" Tyrell whispered. "The property title was transferred 3 days ago," Mrs. Higgins explained. "Mr. Ellis Freeman signed a quitclaim deed transferring full ownership of the property to an entity listed as the Esther Freeman Trust." She looked at me. "Mr. Freeman, do you represent this trust?" I stood up. My knees didn't hurt anymore. My back was straight. I walked to the table, not as a servant, but as the man who had built that house brick by brick. "I do not represent the trust," I said, my voice filling the room. "I am merely the beneficiary. The trustee, the person with the sole legal authority to sell, mortgage, or transfer that property, is not me." Tyrell looked like he was going to vomit. "Then who is it?" he choked out. "Who owns my house?" I smiled. It was the smile of a man who had waited patiently for the trap to snap shut. The door to the conference room opened. A young woman walked in. She was wearing a tailored business suit and carrying a leather briefcase. She looked sharp, professional, and completely out of Tyrell's league. It was Sarah, my niece, the girl Tyrell had mocked for working as a bank teller, the girl he had called poor because she drove a used Honda. She walked to the table and placed her briefcase down with a heavy thud. "I believe you are looking for me," she said, her voice cool and steady. I am Sarah Jenkins, the trustee of the Esther Freeman Trust, and I am afraid this property is not for sale." Tyrell stared at her. His brain could not process what he was seeing. Sarah. Poor cousin Sarah. "You," he stammered. "You own the house." "Technically, the trust owns it," Sarah corrected him. "But yes, I control the trust. And as of 72 hours ago, the trust has entered into a binding contract to sell the property to a third party." "Sold," Courtney whispered. "You sold it." "Yes," Sarah said, "for $2.8 million. $2.8 million. The number hung in the air. Tyrell had sold it to the shark for 1.8. He had undervalued it by $1 million just to get quick cash. "Wait a minute," Victor the shark growled, standing up. "I have a contract. This idiot signed a contract with me. He took a $200,000 deposit." Sarah looked at Victor with zero fear. "That contract is with Tyrell Freeman. Tyrell Freeman does not own the property. Therefore, he committed fraud when he signed that contract. He sold you something he did not have. As for your deposit, I suggest you ask him for it." Victor turned his head slowly toward Tyrell. His eyes were dead. "Where is my money, Tyrell?" he asked, his voice very low. Tyrell backed away, his hands up. I spent it. I spent the car, the fees. I can get it back. Just give me time." "You have 24 hours, Victor said, "or I take it out of your skin." He turned and walked out of the room, his associates trailing behind him. Tyrell collapsed into a chair. He was shaking. He was ruined. He had no house. He had no money. He had a debt to a man who would kill him. And he was facing fraud charges. Courtney looked at him with pure disgust. She didn't go to comfort him. She didn't hold his hand. She looked at me. "You planned this," she hissed. "You knew." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had thrown my wife's clothes on the floor. "I did not plan this, Courtney," I said. "I just prepared for it." "There is a difference." I turned to Mrs. Higgins. "I believe we are done here." I walked out of the room, Sarah by my side, leaving my son in the wreckage of his own greed. The elevator ride down was silent, but it was the most peaceful silence I had ever known. The silence in the conference room was absolute and terrifying, like the sudden drop in pressure before a hurricane hits. For 10 seconds nobody moved and nobody breathed as the notary's words hung in the air like toxic smoke. Then the storm broke. Tyrell let out a sound that was half scream and half sob, a guttural noise of pure animal panic. He lunged across the mahogany table, knocking over a crystal pitcher of water that shattered on the floor, but he did not care. He grabbed the lapels of my old Sunday suit with both hands and hauled me up from the chair. His face was inches from mine, twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. "You old fool! What did you do?" he screamed, shaking me so hard my teeth rattled. "Who did you sign it over to? You are senile. You do not know what you are doing. You gave our house away to some scammer, didn't you?" Courtney was standing behind him, clutching her designer handbag to her chest, her eyes wide with horror. She looked like she was watching a train wreck in slow motion. She started hyperventilating, gasping for air as if the room had suddenly run out of oxygen. "Tell him, Tyrell," she shrieked. "Tell him to undo it. He is incompetent. The signature does not count if he is crazy. Call the police, Tyrell, make him fix this." Tyrell tightened his grip on my jacket, bunching the fabric in his fists. He was sweating profusely now, the perspiration dripping down his forehead and stinging his eyes. He looked at me with a mixture of hatred and desperation that broke whatever tiny piece of my heart was still holding on to the memory of my son. "Who has the deed, Dad?" he hissed, spitting saliva onto my face. "Who is the Esther Freeman Trust? Is it some con artist who called you on the phone? Is it one of those internet scams? You stupid old man, you just ruined us. You gave away $2 million because your brain is rotting. Fix this right now, or I swear to God I will leave you on the street to rot." The shark. Victor Kane stood up from his chair. He did not look angry yet. He looked interested. He watched the scene with cold, dead eyes, calculating his odds of getting his money back. He signaled his two associates, who took a step forward, blocking the only exit to the room. Tyrell shook me again, harder this time. "Answer me," he yelled. "Who did you give my inheritance to?" I looked at my son. I looked at the veins bulging in his neck. I looked at the fear in his eyes. And for the first time in months, I felt absolutely nothing. No pity, no sadness, no love, just a cold, hard clarity. I reached up. My hands were steady. My grip was firm. I grabbed Tyrell's wrists. My hands were calloused from 40 years of pulling wire and bending conduit. My fingers were like steel clamps. I squeezed. Tyrell gasped in pain, his eyes widening in shock. He tried to pull away, but I held him fast. I applied pressure to the pressure points in his wrists, just like my father had taught me. "Let go of me, son," I said. My voice was not the quavering whisper of a scared old man. It was the deep, resonant baritone of Ellis Freeman, master electrician and head of his household. It was a voice Tyrell had not heard since he was a child. Tyrell's grip loosened. I shoved his hands away from my chest with a sharp, violent motion. He stumbled backward, hitting the edge of the conference table and nearly losing his balance. He looked at me, rubbing his wrists, confusion warring with his anger. "Dad," he whispered, "what is wrong with you?" I stood up. I did not use the armrests. I did not groan. I stood up straight, pulling my shoulders back until I towered over him. I smoothed the lapels of my suit, brushing off the invisible dust of his betrayal. I adjusted my tie. I looked around the room, making eye contact with everyone. I looked at Chad, the realtor, who was cowering in his seat. I looked at Victor, the shark, who raised an eyebrow in appreciation. And finally, I looked at Courtney, who had stopped screaming and was staring at me as if I had just grown a second head. "There is nothing wrong with me, Tyrell," I said, my voice filling the room. "My mind is sharp, my memory is perfect, and I am not senile." I took a step toward him, and he took a step back, fear flickering in his eyes. "You thought I was weak," I continued. "You thought I was a foolish old man you could bully and starve and manipulate. You thought you could lock me in a freezing basement and steal the legacy I built with my own 2 hands. You were wrong." I pointed a finger at him. "I did not give the house away to a scammer," I said. "I transferred the title to the Esther Freeman Trust 5 years ago. I did it the week after your mother died because I knew this day would come. I knew you would come for the money, Tyrell. I knew you would not work for it. I knew you would try to take the easy way out, just like you always do." Tyrell shook his head in denial. "That is a lie," he stammered. "Mom would never do that. The house was supposed to be mine. The house was never yours," I snapped. "It belonged to Esther and me. And now it belongs to her memory. I am just the manager, Tyrell. I am just the caretaker. I live there by the grace of the trust. I have a lifetime right of occupancy, but I do not own the bricks, which means I cannot sell them. And neither can you." Courtney let out a low moan. "But we spent the money," she whispered. "The car, the wedding debt, the loan. We spent it all based on the sale." "That sounds like a personal problem," I said coldly. "You spent money you did not have on assets you did not own. That is not a tragedy." "Courtney, that is stupidity." Tyrell looked like he was going to pass out. "But the signature," he said, his voice trembling. "You signed the deed in the basement. I saw you." I laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound. "I signed E. Freeman," I said. "Do you know what the E stands for, Tyrell? It stands for empty. It stands for eviction. It stands for the end of your free ride. That signature is worthless, just like your promises, just like your gratitude." Tyrell sank into a chair. He put his head in his hands. "This cannot be happening," he muttered. "Who controls the trust? If you do not own it, someone has to. Who did you give it to?" I smiled. It was the moment I had been waiting for. "I did not give it to a stranger," I said. "I gave it to the only person in this family who understands the value of $1. I gave it to the only person who never asked me for a dime." I turned toward the heavy double doors at the end of the conference room. "You can come in now," I called out. The doors swung open. The sound of confident footsteps echoed on the marble floor. A woman walked in. She was wearing a tailored charcoal suit that fit her perfectly. Her hair was pulled back in a severe professional bun. She carried a leather briefcase that looked like it meant business. She walked with a stride that commanded respect. Tyrell looked up, his eyes squinted, trying to process the image. It was Sarah. Sarah, my second cousin's daughter. Sarah, who worked as a teller at the local credit union. Sarah, who drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic and lived in a studio apartment in Queens. Sarah, who Tyrell had mocked at every family barbecue for being poor and unambitious. She did not look poor today. She looked like a CEO. She walked straight to the head of the table. She did not look at me. She looked directly at Tyrell. "Hello, cousin," she said, her voice cool and smooth as glass. Tyrell's mouth fell open. "Sarah," he whispered, "what are you doing here? Did Dad hire you to clean the office?" Sarah laughed. It was not a nice laugh. It was the laugh of someone who held all the aces. "I am not the cleaning lady Tyrell," she said, placing her briefcase on the table. "I am the director of the Esther Freeman Trust. I am the sole trustee. And I am the legal owner of the property you just tried to fraudulently sell." She opened the briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents stamped with official seals, and according to my records, she continued looking at Chad and the shark. "You two gentlemen are trespassing on a transaction that does not exist," Courtney gasped. "Sarah! You gave the house to Sarah. She is a bank teller. She is nobody. She is the person who visited me every Sunday I said. She is the person who brought me groceries when I was sick. She is the person who sat with Esther in the hospital while you were in Vegas gambling away your tuition money. She is family Tyrell. Real family." Sarah looked at Courtney with a smile that could cut glass. "Actually, Courtney, I was promoted last month. I am a branch manager now. But that is irrelevant. What is relevant is that as the trustee, I have a fiduciary duty to protect the assets of the trust. And right now, the biggest threat to those assets is you." She turned to Victor the shark. "Mr. Kane," she said, addressing him by name, "I apologize for the inconvenience. It appears you have been the victim of a scam. My cousin here sold you a property he did not own. I suggest you get your deposit back. Immediately." Victor stood up. He looked at Tyrell. He cracked his knuckles. "I think that is a great idea," he said. Tyrell looked from Sarah to me to the shark. The trap had snapped shut. The lion he thought was toothless had just bitten his head off, and the cousin he thought was a sheep was actually the wolf. Sarah reached into her leather briefcase and pulled out a document that looked official enough to end a war. It was printed on heavy bond paper and bore the raised seal of the state of New York. She slid it across the polished mahogany table until it rested directly in front of Tyrell. He stared at it as if it were a venomous snake coiled and ready to strike. "Read it, Tyrell," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "Read the date. Read the grantor. And most importantly, read the grantee." Tyrell picked up the paper with trembling hands. His eyes darted across the lines of legal text, trying to find a loophole, trying to find a mistake, trying to find anything that would save him from the abyss opening up beneath his feet. "This is a deed," he whispered. "Yes," Sarah replied. "It is a deed. A valid legal deed. Executed 3 days ago. On Monday morning, while you were busy terrorizing your father and forcing him to wash your car, Ellis Freeman, acting as the beneficiary of the Esther Freeman Trust, instructed me as the trustee to finalize the sale of the property at 412 Decatur Street." She paused, letting the words sink in. "We sold the house Tyrell, but we did not sell it to a predatory investor who wanted to gut it. We sold it to the Brooklyn Black Heritage Preservation Society. They have been trying to acquire the property for years because of its historical significance. They plan to turn it into a museum celebrating the history of black craftsmanship in the borough." Tyrell looked up, his face the color of ash. "You sold it?" Sarah nodded. "And because we were not desperate, because we were not trying to make a quick buck to pay off gambling debts, we negotiated a fair market price." She pointed to the figure at the bottom of the page. $2,800,000, she said clearly. The number hit the room like a physical blow. Tyrell had agreed to sell the house to Victor the Shark for $1.8 million. In his haste and greed, he had undersold his own birthright by exactly $1 million. He had left $1 million on the table just so he could get cash fast enough to save his own skin. Chad the realtor let out a low whistle of appreciation. 2.8, he muttered. "That is a record for the block." Courtney looked like she was going to be sick. 2.8 million, she breathed. Her eyes glazed over as she did the math of what 50% of that would have been. $1.4 million. She had been planning to divorce Tyrell for $900,000. She had lost $500,000 because of her husband's incompetence. "You tricked me!" Tyrell screamed, slamming the paper down. "You went behind my back. That money is mine. I am the heir. I am the only son. Where is the check?" "Give me the check, Sarah." He stood up and reached for the briefcase, thinking the money was inside. Sarah did not flinch. She placed her hand over the latch of the case. "Sit down, Tyrell," she ordered. "You are not listening. You are not the heir to this house. You never were. And you are certainly not the beneficiary of this sale." Tyrell froze. "What do you mean?" Sarah opened a second folder. She pulled out a flowchart that showed the structure of the trust. The proceeds from the sale, $2,800,000 have already been wired, she explained. But they did not go to Ellis Freeman's personal account. And they certainly did not go to you. The money was deposited directly into the Esther Freeman Scholarship Fund. It is a charitable organization established by your father 5 years ago. The principal is locked. It cannot be touched. The interest generated by the fund will be used exclusively to provide full college scholarships for underprivileged students in Brooklyn who want to study electrical engineering or trade skills. She looked Tyrell dead in the eye. Your mother's legacy is going to help kids who actually want to work, Tyrell. Kids who have ambition. Kids who would never dream of stealing from their parents. Not a single penny of that $2.8 million will ever be used to buy a luxury car or pay off a bookie. Tyrell collapsed back into his chair. It was as if his strings had been cut. Gone. It was all gone. The house, the money, the future. But what about Dad? He stammered, looking at me. Where is he going to live? You sold his house. He is homeless. I smiled. I leaned back in my chair and crossed my arms. I am not homeless, son, I said. Part of the sale agreement included a special provision. The trust used a portion of its existing assets to purchase a penthouse apartment in downtown Brooklyn. It is fully paid for. It has a doorman, a gym, and a view of the bridge. Sarah slid a set of keys across the table toward me. They jingled musically as they slid, stopping right in front of my hands. Life estate, she said. Ellis Freeman retains a life estate in the new property. He has the right to live there rent-free for the rest of his natural life. He owns the right to occupy, but not the property itself. Which means, Tyrell, that even if you managed to force him to sign another deed, you could not sell his apartment either. It belongs to the trust. I picked up the keys. They felt cool and heavy in my hand. So you see, Tyrell, I said, my voice calm, I am taken care of. My future is secure. Esther's memory is honored. The community is served. Everyone wins. I paused and looked at him. Except you. You lose everything. Courtney let out a sob. This cannot be real, she cried. We have nothing. We have absolutely nothing. That is not entirely true, Sarah said, closing her briefcase. You have the G-Wagon, and I assume you have the debt that goes with it. The mention of the debt seemed to wake Victor Kane from his trance. The shark had been sitting silently watching the drama unfold with the cold detachment of a predator watching prey struggle in a net. But now he realized that the net was empty. The house he came to buy was gone. The profit he planned to make had vanished. He turned his head slowly toward Tyrell. His neck cracked. His movement was reptilian. So Victor said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the table. Let me get this straight. You do not own the house. Tyrell shook his head, terrified. Number, and you cannot sell me the house. No. Victor nodded slowly. He looked at his fingernails. They were manicured and polished. That is unfortunate, he said. Because we had a deal, Tyrell. We signed a contract. And based on that contract, I gave you a deposit. Tyrell flinched. The color drained from his face until he looked like a corpse. $200,000, Victor said. Cash. In a duffel bag. Handed to you 3 days ago in the back of my car. Do you remember that, Tyrell? Tyrell nodded. Yes, I remember. Good, Victor said. Because I want it back. Now. He held out his hand, palm up. It was a demand, not a request. Tyrell started to hyperventilate. He pulled at his collar. He looked at Courtney. He looked at the door. He looked anywhere but at Victor's hand. I do not have it on me, he squeaked. Victor's hand did not move. Where is it? Tyrell swallowed hard. I spent it. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Victor did not yell. He did not flip the table. He just lowered his hand slowly and placed it on the table. He leaned in close to Tyrell. You spent my money, he whispered. We bought the car, Tyrell blurted out, pointing at Courtney. She wanted the G-Wagon. We paid $180,000 cash plus the markup and the expedited registration. It is gone, Victor. All of it, Courtney shrieked. Do not blame this on me. You told me we had the money. You told me the house sale was a done deal. Victor ignored her. He kept his eyes locked on Tyrell. You spent $200,000 of my money on a car because you thought you were going to sell me a house you did not own. That is called theft, Tyrell. In my line of work, we do not call the police for theft. We handle it internally. He stood up. His two associates stepped forward, their hands moving inside their jackets. Tyrell scrambled backward, his chair screeching against the marble floor. Victor, wait. I can get it back. I can sell the car. I can get a refund. You have 24 hours, Victor said. His voice was final. One day. If I do not have my $200,000 plus a $50,000 inconvenience fee by noon tomorrow, I am going to take it out of you. He looked at Tyrell's hands gripping the edge of the table. I will start with your thumbs, he said matter-of-factly, and I will work my way up to your knees. Do you understand me? Tyrell nodded, tears streaming down his face. Yes. Yes, I understand. Victor turned to me. He nodded respectfully. Mr. Freeman, my apologies for the disturbance. You played a good game. I respect a man who protects his own. He turned and walked out. Chad, the realtor, scrambled after him, terrified of being associated with the disaster. Tyrell sat alone at the table, sobbing. He was a man who had lost his past, his present, and his future in the span of 20 minutes. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. Dad, help me, he wept. He is going to kill me. You have money. Sarah said the house sold for $2.8 million. Just loan me the $200,000. Please, Dad. I am your son. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I looked down at him. I do not have any money, Tyrell, I said. The trust has the money, and I am just a beneficiary. I have no authority to disperse funds for personal debts, especially not for gambling debts or luxury cars. But you can ask Sarah, Tyrell begged. She will listen to you. I looked at Sarah. She was putting her files away, her face impassive. Sarah, I asked, does the trust charter allow for bailouts of family members who attempt to defraud the grantor? Sarah snapped the locks on her briefcase. I am afraid not, Ellis. The charter is very specific. Educational purposes only. Paying off a loan shark does not qualify as education. Although she paused and looked at Tyrell. I suppose this is a very expensive lesson. I turned back to Tyrell. You heard her, son. My hands are tied. Just like yours will be if you do not find that money. I turned and walked toward the door. I did not look back. I did not feel guilt. I felt the weight of 40 years of enabling lifting off my shoulders. He was on his own now, and for the first time in his life, he was going to have to pay the bill. The ride back to Decatur Street was a funeral procession without a body. Tyrell drove the G-Wagon, his hands gripping the leather steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. Courtney sat in the passenger seat staring out the window, her face a mask of ruined mascara and shock. I sat in the back next to Sarah. We did not speak. There was nothing left to say. The air in the car was thick with the smell of expensive new car leather and the stench of absolute failure. When we turned the corner onto our block, the street was lit up like a Christmas tree. But it was not festive lights. It was the red and blue strobe of police cruisers. 2 squad cars were parked directly in front of my brownstone. A large black SUV with the logo of the Brooklyn Black Heritage Preservation Society was parked in the driveway, blocking the garage. Tyrell slammed on the brakes. What is this? He whispered. Why are the police here? He parked the car haphazardly in front of a fire hydrant. We all got out. The neighbors were on their porches watching. Mrs. Johnson was there, sitting on her rocking chair holding a cup of tea, nodding at me as I stepped onto the sidewalk. She knew. I had told her to be ready for the show. A police officer stepped forward. He was a big man with a face carved from granite. I recognized him. Officer Miller. He had been patrolling this neighborhood for 15 years. Are you Tyrell Freeman? He asked, his hand resting casually near his belt. Yes, Tyrell stammered. This is my house. Why are you blocking my driveway? Correction, the officer said. This is not your house. This property belongs to the Black Heritage Preservation Society. We received a call from the director, Ms. Sarah Jenkins, stating that there were unauthorized occupants attempting to damage the property and remove historical fixtures. Sarah stepped forward. That is correct, officer. These 2 individuals have been squatting here. They have destroyed a retaining wall and vandalized the interior. I want them removed immediately, Courtney let out a shriek. Squatting. We live here. My clothes are inside. My makeup is inside. You cannot lock us out. The officer looked at Courtney with zero sympathy. Ma'am, unless you have a lease or a deed with your name on it, you are trespassing. The new owners have taken possession. They are changing the locks as we speak." He pointed to the front door. A locksmith was already there drilling out the deadbolt I had installed 20 years ago. The sound of the drill was loud and final. "You have 5 minutes to grab your essentials," the officer said. "An officer will escort you. Anything else you can petition for in civil court. Now move." Tyrell looked at the house. He looked at the officer. He looked at me. "Dad," he pleaded, "do something. Tell them I live here." I looked at my son. I adjusted my suit jacket. "I cannot do that, son," I said calmly. "I am just a guest here myself now. I have a life estate, but that only covers me. It does not cover trespassers." Tyrell slumped against the side of the G-Wagon. He looked like a man who had been punched in the gut. He had lost the sale. He had lost the money. And now he was homeless. But I was not done. The knife was in, but I had to twist it. I had to show him exactly what he had sacrificed everything for. I had to show him the true face of the woman standing next to him. I walked over to where they were standing by the car. Courtney was frantically texting, probably trying to call her mother. Tyrell was staring at the ground, his shoulders shaking. "Before you go inside," I said, reaching into my pocket, "there is something you should hear, Tyrell." Courtney looked up. Her eyes narrowed. "What do you want, old man?" I pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen. I turned the volume all the way up. "I recorded this on Sunday," I said, "while you were in the sunroom, Courtney. While you were talking to your mother." I pressed play. Courtney's voice rang out clear and sharp in the evening air. "I do not care what happens to him, Mom. He can have the other half to pay off his gambling debts or whatever. He is going to be broke in a year anyway. He is weak. He has no vision. He is just like his father." Useless. Tyrell's head snapped up. He looked at the phone, then at Courtney. The recording continued. "Once I have my share, I am filing for divorce on grounds of irreconcilable differences. I already have the papers drafted." Courtney lunged for the phone. "Give me that!" she screamed, her nails clawing at my hand. I stepped back easily. The officer stepped between us, blocking her path. The recording played on, relentless. "And Mom, you will never guess who is waiting for me in Miami. Jax. Yes, the trainer from Equinox. He says I am his muse." Tyrell stood frozen. His face went from pale to bright red. He looked at his wife. The woman he had gone into debt for. The woman he had tried to put his father in a nursing home for. "Jax," he whispered. "The trainer. You told me he was gay." The recording delivered the final blow. "Tyrell is getting soft. He smells like stress and cheap beer. I can barely stand to sleep in the same bed as him. Last night he tried to hug me and I almost threw up." I stopped the playback. The silence on the street was heavier than the humid air. Tyrell looked at Courtney. His eyes were wet, but his jaw was set. "You were going to leave me," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "You were going to take the money and leave." Courtney did not deny it. She did not cry. She dropped the act completely. She straightened her back and looked at him with pure disgust. "Of course I was going to leave you," she spat. "Look at you, Tyrell. You are a loser. You could not even sell a house right. You let your senile father outsmart you. You are pathetic. I deserve better than this. I deserve a real man, not a daddy's boy who cannot close a deal." Tyrell let out a roar. It was a sound of pure heartbreak and fury. He raised his hand as if to strike her. "Don't you dare!" Courtney hissed, stepping into his space. "You touch me and I will sue you for everything you have left, which is nothing. You are broke, Tyrell. You are nothing." Tyrell collapsed. He fell to his knees on the sidewalk right in front of the neighbors, right in front of the police. He put his hands over his face and sobbed. It was a pathetic sound. The sound of a man realizing his entire life was a lie. Courtney looked down at him and sneered. "God, get up. You are embarrassing me." She turned to the G-Wagon. "Whatever. I am leaving. I am taking the car. I will send for my things later." She reached for the door handle. "Excuse me, ma'am," a new voice said. We all turned. A tow truck had pulled up behind the police cars. A man in a grease-stained jumpsuit was walking toward us holding a clipboard. "Are you Courtney Freeman?" he asked. "Yes," she snapped. "Get out of my way." "I am afraid I cannot do that," the man said. "I have a repossession order for this vehicle." Courtney froze. "What?" "We just bought this. We paid the down payment." The man checked his clipboard. According to the dealership, the financing application was flagged for fraud about an hour ago. Something about inflated income statements and falsified employment records. The bank pulled the loan. They want the asset back. He signaled to the driver of the truck. Hook it up. No. Courtney screamed, throwing herself against the door of the car. You cannot take it. It is mine. I need it for my brand. Officer Miller stepped in. Ma'am, step away from the vehicle. Do not make me arrest you for obstruction. Courtney looked at the officer, then at the tow truck, then at me. Her face crumpled. The G-Wagon was her last lifeline. It was her ticket to Miami, her ticket to Jack's. She stepped back, sobbing hysterically as the tow truck driver began to hook the chains to the axle. The metal clanking sounded like a death knell. I looked down at Tyrell. He was still on his knees watching his wife scream over a car while she ignored him completely. But the night was not over. The final hammer was about to fall. Officer Miller walked over to Tyrell. He pulled a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. Tyrell Freeman, he said, his voice formal and cold. Stand up. Tyrell looked up confused. Dirt streaked his tear-stained face. What? Why? You are under arrest, the officer said, pulling Tyrell to his feet. For what? Tyrell cried. I did not hit her. I did not do anything. For grand larceny, forgery, and bank fraud, the officer recited, spinning Tyrell around and slamming him against the hood of the police car. We have a warrant regarding a loan taken out in the amount of $350,000 using fraudulent collateral. We also have evidence of you attempting to sell a property you do not own, which constitutes attempted real estate fraud. The metal cuffs clicked shut. Tyrell struggled. No, that was a mistake. I can explain. My dad, he will tell you. Dad, tell them. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. Dad, please. Tell them I did not mean it. I will pay it back. Just bail me out. I walked over to the police car. I looked my son in the eye. I cannot help you, Tyrell, I said. I warned you. I gave you every chance. You chose to steal, you chose to lie, you chose to throw me away. Dad, please, he wept. I am your son. You are a stranger, I said softly. My son died the day he pushed me down in my own living room. Officer Miller put his hand on Tyrell's head and guided him into the back of the cruiser. Courtney was standing on the sidewalk watching. She did not look sad. She looked calculated. She was probably already thinking about how to spin this for her social media. Husband arrested, shocking update link in bio. Officer Miller turned to Courtney. Mrs. Freeman, he said, you might want to call a lawyer too. Your name is on the credit card applications that were flagged for identity theft. We will be coming for you next. Courtney's face went white. She turned and ran. She ran down the street, her heels clicking frantically, disappearing into the Brooklyn night without a car, without a husband, and without a dime. I stood on the sidewalk next to Sarah and watched the police car drive away with my son in the back. I watched the tow truck drag the G-Wagon around the corner. The street was quiet again. Mrs. Johnson gave me a thumbs up from her porch. Sarah put her hand on my shoulder. Are you okay, Ellis? I looked at the house. My house. It was safe now. The cancer had been cut out. I am fine, Sarah, I said. I am finally fine. I turned and walked up the steps to the front door. The locksmith handed me a shiny new key. Welcome home, Mr. Freeman, he said. I took the key. It felt heavy. It felt like freedom. I unlocked the door and walked inside. It was empty. It was messy. But it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, the air inside felt clean. It has been 30 days since I walked out of the police station leaving my son in the back of a squad car, and 30 days since I last felt the crushing weight of betrayal on my chest. I am sitting on the balcony of my new apartment on the 45th floor of a glass tower in downtown Brooklyn. The view is different here. Instead of the narrow street and the nosy neighbors, I see the steel span of the Brooklyn Bridge cutting across the East River against the sunset. It is a view that costs $10,000 a month, but I am not paying a dime because the trust pays for everything as part of my lifetime housing stipend. The air up here smells clean, it smells like freedom, and it smells like a fresh start. Inside the living room, the turntable is spinning. It is playing A Love Supreme by John Coltrane, the original pressing. Yes, I saved it. While Tyrell and Courtney were busy destroying the kitchen walls, I had moved the most valuable vinyls to the trunk of my old sedan under the spare tire. They thought they had thrown away my soul, but they only threw away the decoys. I am wearing a silk robe now, and I am drinking espresso from a cup that does not have a chip in the rim. I am done with coveralls. I am done with dirt under my fingernails, and I am done pretending to be a poor old man just to see if anyone would love me for me. The test is over, and everyone failed except the one person I never expected. The silence is broken by the harsh ringing of my phone sitting on the glass table. I look at the screen and it says unknown number. I know who it is because I have been expecting this call for weeks. I press answer and put it on speaker. A robotic voice tells me I have a collect call from an inmate at Rikers Island Correctional Facility, and I accept the charges. Dad. Tyrell's voice is a jagged whisper that sounds like it has been dragged over gravel. He sounds small. He sounds broken. He sounds exactly like the child who used to break windows and hide behind his mother's skirt waiting for me to fix it. Dad, please do not hang up. I need help. I have been in here for a month and it is hell, Dad. You have to get me out. I lean back in my leather chair, watching the city lights flicker on one by one. I cannot get you out, Tyrell, I say calmly. The judge set bail at $500,000 because of the flight risk since you tried to leave the country once, and the prosecutor thinks you will try again. No, Dad, listen. Tyrell pleads, his voice cracking with desperation. I know you have the money, because Sarah sold the house for $2.8 million. Just use some of that to post bail. I will pay you back, I swear. I will work. I will do anything, just get me out of here. The sharks know I am in here. Dad, they have people on the inside, and I am scared. I take a sip of my espresso, allowing the rich bitterness to coat my tongue. You want me to use your mother's money to bail you out? I ask. The money that is going to send 50 kids from our neighborhood to college. You want me to take their future and use it to clean up your mess? Yes, Tyrell sobs. Yes, because I am your son. Blood is thicker than water. Dad, you cannot choose strangers over your own flesh and blood. I close my eyes and I remember him pushing me down. I remember him laughing while Courtney mocked me. I remember the cold basement and the hunger. I open my eyes and look at the bridge. Blood is cheap, Tyrell, I say. Respect is expensive, and you spent all your credit a long time ago. Besides, I cannot help you even if I wanted to. Why, Tyrell screams into the phone. Why not? Because I am just a gardener, I say, my voice cold as ice. I am just a charity case living in a basement. I am a senile old man who forgets things, and right now I seem to have forgotten that I have a son. Dad, no please. Goodbye, Tyrell. I press the red button and the line goes dead. I block the number. I do not feel guilt. I feel like a surgeon who has finally cut out the rot to save the patient. The sliding glass door opens and Sarah walks out onto the balcony holding 2 glasses of red wine. Real wine this time, a vintage Cabernet that breathes in the glass. She hands me one and sits down across from me, placing a set of architectural blueprints on the table between us. I trace the white lines with my finger, admiring the layout. It is beautiful, I say. It is the Esther Freeman Community Center. It will be built on the lot where my brownstone stands. They are keeping the facade and the historical brickwork, but the inside will be classrooms, workshops, and a library dedicated to teaching trades to young people. My house will no longer be a monument to my past. It will be a factory for the future. Sarah smiles at me, looking tired but happy. The board approved the final design today, she says. We break ground in the spring. And Tyrell, I ask. Sarah takes a sip of wine. His lawyer is trying to plead insanity, she says. But with the videos you recorded showing how calculated he was, it will not stick. He is looking at 10 to 15 years for the fraud and the elder abuse charges. Courtney was arrested in Miami yesterday trying to use a stolen credit card to buy a plane ticket to Brazil. It is over, Ellis. I nod slowly. It is over. I look at the blueprints, and then I look at the bridge, and finally I look at the young woman who saved me, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. I raise my glass. To family, I say. Sarah clinks her glass against mine. To family, she repeats. I take a drink, and the wine is smooth and complex, tasting like victory. I learned the hard way that family is not about whose blood runs in your veins. It is about who stands by you when you are bleeding. It is about respect, and it is about honor. Tyrell sold me out for a car and a woman who hated him. He bought a one-way ticket out of my life, and honestly, it was the best deal he ever made because it gave me back my life. My name is Ellis Freeman. I am 68 years old. I have no house and I have no son, but I have a legacy. And for the first time in a long time, I am free. I spent 40 years building a fortune to leave to my son, thinking that financial security was the ultimate expression of love. But I was wrong. By shielding him from struggle, I robbed him of character. I learned that true wealth is not about the balance in your bank account or the car in your driveway. It is about the peace in your home and the dignity you carry within yourself. You cannot buy loyalty, and you certainly cannot buy a backbone. Sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is let their child fall so they can finally learn how to stand up on their own. If you agree that respect must be earned and not inherited, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice. And tell me in the comments, would you have bailed Tyrell out, or did he get exactly what he deserved?